knowingly lied, any minister, whether it's the most important one, the Prime Minister, or the most junior minister, lying to the House of Commons is a capital offence and would have to go. And if the officials have lied when they're advising you, they should go.
On the 10th of September, the Prime Minister misled Parliament by saying the full due process was followed. If Manderson failed the security vetting, full due process was not followed. Misleading Parliament is a resigning offence.
The Ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret for his association with him. He's right to do so. I have confidence in him, and he's playing an important role in the UK-US relationship.
It was clear that the Prime Minister wanted to make this appointment himself, and had therefore I understand that the FCDO was informed of his decision and acted.
This is the scandal, as you say. If the Prime Minister's knowingly lied, any minister, whether it's the most important one, the Prime Minister, or the most junior minister, lying to the House of Commons is a capital offence and would have to go. And if the officials have lied when they're advising you, they should go.
On the 10th of September, the Prime Minister misled Parliament by saying the full due process was followed. If Manderson failed the security vetting, full due process was not followed. Misleading Parliament is a resigning offence.
The Ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret for his association with him. He's right to do so. I have confidence in him, and he's playing an important role in the UK-US relationship.
It was clear that the Prime Minister wanted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. It is 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. As you can imagine, we have just been watching all of the events with Olly Robbins. Olly Robbins, the former, now sacked chief civil servant at the Foreign Office, and came out for the news. And I have to say, as and when we get anything new and explosive from him, we will bring it to you first here. But I think, you know, after an hour, I think we may have, well, frankly, got the gist of what the sacked civil servant has had to say. He ain't going away quietly. I think we can safely say that for sure. So much to talk about on the show, and basically whether you're listening on DB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is absolutely fabulous to have your company today. If you do miss anything, go to my YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. But coming up in this hour, obviously, we're going to talk a lot about what Keir Starmer had to say in the House of Commons yesterday, and also what he didn't have to say, including an apology to you and me, the voters, for, lying to us about the Manderson scandal and about what he did or did not know. Not an apology to MPs, our elected representatives. He didn't actually make that apology. He didn't even say he'd misled the House of Commons when he absolutely did do exactly that. But what Sir Olly Robbins, the sacked Foreign Office chief, has had to say has been, well, no doubt at all about it. What many commentators are calling explosive this morning. No wonder so many people jeered. Commons in the Commons, MPs on all sides jeered at the Prime Minister yesterday when he talked about how how extraordinary the situation was. Incredible, he said it was. Yeah, indeed it is. Not credible, Prime Minister, but absolutely crucial evidence from Olly Robbins, sacked. Officially got his sacking letter yesterday on his birthday, God bless him. But basically he suggested that not only had the Cabinet Office, which is basically an office of the Prime Minister to all intents and purposes, has suggested there was no need to vet Peter Manderson at all, for the post of being our most senior diplomat, access to the highest level of security, diplomatic and defence briefings. Number 10 had applied constant pressure, almost daily phone calls to the Foreign Office to get the approval of Manderson's appointment, and took a dismissive attitude to his vetting. He revealed that Peter Manderson had been given access to the Foreign Office building, to the computers, to high classification IT, so low classification IT, but higher classification briefings before he had been granted security clearance. And he said that number 10 showed, in his words, no interest in the actual vetting. The entire focus was when he was going to get the vetting so he could go out to Washington, ideally in time for the inauguration in January, but rather than whether he was going to pass the vetting. And Olly Robbins, it would appear, took the view that, well, regardless of the pressure that he was under, he clearly took the view that basically this was going to go ahead anyway, and it would have been, in his words, very difficult for him to have not gone along with it. He said he was told that it was a borderline case whether or not the Prime Minister's choice for the ambassador to Washington, Peter Manderson, had passed the vetting. It was borderline, he was told, and he made the decision, as he was entitled to, under the process. We know how much the Prime Minister cares about process, don't we? Goes on about it all the sodding time. But Olly Robbins made the decision that actually, on borderline, he would actually grant that approval. But he did it in the context that, as he said, when he took over the job at the Foreign Office, he'd only been in the job a couple of weeks by the time the decision was made. Due diligence had been completed by the Cabinet Office, as in, they basically done their own checks. Approval of the appointment had been given by the King. The appointment had been publicly announced back in December. They'd already gone to both the America, both to Trump's people and to the officials in Washington for through the diplomatic process of what's called agrément. He'd already had access to the Foreign Office building and, let's say, IT access, and been granted that highly classified briefing. So at this point, it was kind of done and dusted. And so he went along with it. That seems to be the argument. However, he did say he was rather restricted in what he could say today because he's taking legal advice on his dismissal, which I have a funny feeling, folks, is going to cost you and me some hundreds of thousands of pounds in a payoff. But I want to hear from you today. What do you make of the evidence Olly Robbins gave? Bearing in mind this is a complicated story, but also what Keir Starmer had to say in Parliament yesterday, because there's a debate at 12:30 today called by the Tories as well. Will Keir Starmer appear again, or has he used up all of his loyal little statements that he made yesterday, which he, for some bizarre reason, thinks is his get-out clause for this whole scandal? It seems to me to be absolutely clear from everything the Prime Minister did say and didn't say yesterday, and everything that Sir Olly Robbins is saying this morning, that the Prime Minister has lied and lied and lied again. And at the end of the day, he knew perfectly well that Peter Manderson was as dodgy as hell and a totally inappropriate appointment as our UK ambassador to the US, but he was going to appoint him anyway, come hell or high water. Why did he think that? That's the absolute mystery. The gold dust that he could apparently sprinkle on UK-US diplomatic relations. Well, how did that work out for us all, Prime Minister, given he was out of a job a year later? But the reality is he decided to go ahead with that. He didn't care whether he'd passed vetting. The Prime Minister said repeatedly that he didn't see the vetting, but if he'd seen the vetting, if he'd known what he knew when he sacked him, he'd known that when he appointed him, he would never have appointed him. But we've seen document after document and statement after statement, even the ones the Prime Minister himself has made, that shows that, yes, he did know. He knew everything. He knew all the concerns about his relationship with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, including after he had been imprisoned for soliciting an underage child for prostitution. He knew all about his business links with China. He knew all about his business links with Russia. All of that was in the vetting document that the Prime Minister himself has admitted seeing. And yet he went ahead with that appointment anyway, really not bothered at all about the high-level security clearance that job would involve. He put our country's national security at risk because he wanted to appoint his mate, his chief of staff's mate, mentor, to the job. He put us all at risk. The Prime Minister has lied to us. The Prime Minister has put the country's national security at risk. I can think of no other better reasons for the Prime Minister to resign, and resign he must. All right, well, let's talk about all of this with Benedict Spence, who's a Conservative commentator, joins us this morning. Very good morning to you.
A very good morning.
I mean, I have to say it's extraordinary watching that debate yesterday in the House of Commons. watching certainly the first hour of Sir Olly Robbins today, I was a bit of a feeling that it's not going to be bombshell stuff. Genuinely, within his first statement, he basically was giving a lot of information that was contained in a letter which I've got here, which he sent to the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Dame Emily Thornberry. And bear in mind, she's a Labour MP, but she holds no candle for Keir Starmer, who very ruthlessly, having had her in his shadow cabinet, did not point her to his actual cabinet, and she has an axe to grind there, rather usefully for all of us. No, Patsy is she this time. What do you make of all of this? Where does this leave us?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I think it was something of a masterclass of death by civil servant, which is, it's ostensibly sort of very placid language, not particularly gripping, but nonetheless, when you listen to it in plain English, as he liked to say himself, Olly Robbins, actually, yes, fairly devastating. It diametrically contradicts what the Prime Minister has been, trying to tell us all. Not that anybody actually believed him, but, truly astounding. And the way in which Olly Robbins has sort of described what was going on, the procedure, and as you sort of say, the impression that was given that it was almost a fait accompli, that it had to be done. Honestly, I was going to say it's difficult to see how the Prime Minister does hang on. Of course, we do all see how he could hang on because he's Keir Starmer and he doesn't necessarily think that he has to listen to what anybody else says. If he did think that, he might not have appointed Peter Mandelson in the first place. But still, it's incredibly devastating. But as we all know, this scandal was going to run and run and run, slow-acting poison. I think this is a really acute moment for it, though. I mean, honestly, how he can possibly push back against this evidence. I mean, I'm fascinated to find out how this great international human rights lawyer is going to do it. He didn't do a very good job yesterday.
No, he absolutely didn't. And again, I think he thought he did a very good job. And I'm sure everyone in Dumbarton was patting him on the back. But by the way, it's just got worse. In the last minute or so, Olly Robbins has said that Peter Manderson was asked whether there was a job for Matthew Doyle in the US network. Now, he's Lord Doyle, again, another one of the Blairite Labour protégés. And Matthew Doyle is the man who has had to sort of step back from the House of Lords, his position there, because he campaigned in an election for a friend of his who was at that time under investigation for paedophile crimes and has since been convicted. He says he didn't believe that he was actually guilty, and he certainly was before his conviction, but I'm not entirely sure that's going to hold sway with a lot of us. We are seeing, just bad judgment after bad judgment after bad judgment. I mean, basically, was anyone here friends with a pedo? Would you like a really high-powered job and access to classified briefing? Here you go. That seems to be official government policy, which I find rather worrying. But I think you're right. It's interesting. Death by civil servant. What is really interesting, actually, is how you'd think that this guy... I hold no candle for Olly Robbins. This is arch-Remainiac. He's the man who's basically Theresa May's bagman, chief negotiator of the Brexit deal she was trying to do, the one that Parliament rejected 3 times because it was the worst deal going, and then had to be rescued by Lord Frost and Boris Johnson. We didn't get a great deal, but it's a damn sight better than what he was trying to do. A whole bunch of Europhiles, basically, coming a cropper. I've got to be honest with you, I don't think this man's a Democrat. I don't think he was doing the will of the British people. I think he was basically trying to undermine a democratic vote and a manifesto commitment from Theresa May. She shouldn't have allowed it to happen, but I'd also hold him responsible for what he did. But here's the interesting thing. It's been pointed out from some commentators. Olly Robbins is claiming basically the Foreign Office was under pressure. Phone calls almost daily. Look, hey, when's clearance? Can you get the vetting done? We need to get him clear. We need to get Manderson out to Washington before the president starts on January the 20th after the inauguration. They wanted to expedite that clearance. He says, though, he didn't bow to that pressure. He didn't have to tell anyone about it. He wasn't allowed to give anyone information. He'd not seen the actual vetting himself, but he knew the results of it, although he'd been told it was borderline. In fact, it was an outright no, we now know. But he says he still thinks he made the right call, regardless of that pressure. Now, the funny thing about it is that's actually, in a way, a defence for Number 10. If they went along that, well, he thinks he made the right call. He didn't tell us. Manderson was vetted. So we're in the clear. That would actually help Number 10. But throughout this, Number 10's argument has been the exact opposite. No, there was no pressure. No, it was entirely up to them. Also, that he made the wrong call at the end of the vetting process, and they would never have allowed him to be US ambassador to the US if they had known that he'd failed the vetting. So they're both arguing completely different things. And interestingly, it is number 10 that was doing the Prime Minister up like a kipper.
Yes, they've slightly snookered themselves by, I think, trying to preemptively get out ahead of that.
They're not very clever.
They're not actually, are they?
Trying
to get out ahead of that because they understand what the public attitude is and what the attitude of most people watching this is, which is that it is the wrong decision. So they're therefore trying to get out ahead and say, oh, actually it was and it's nothing to do with us. But as you point out, actually, they will have been well aware of the process that was actually involved here. And this was why I suspect they thought that they'd be able to probably get away with it, because they thought the process will exonerate us. It will redeem us, actually. We will be able to point to it and say, well, nothing untoward was done. But I think, frankly, the Prime Minister has he's jumped the gun in terms of sacking Olly Robbins, frankly, because he felt he needed a scapegoat, because he's under that amount of pressure. And in doing so, I think he's created a rod for his own back. Something else, just very interestingly, on the subject of the Matthew Doyle information.
Well, by the way, it was an ambassadorship.
An ambassadorship, not just a role. And on top of that, Olly Robbins says he was instructed by number 10 not to mention it to David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, which I think tells you rather a lot. That even if number 10 knew, we could maybe give this favour to our mate, but absolutely don't tell the guy who's in charge of the Foreign Office, because he might go ballistic, because he will know this is a dreadful idea. So there is some understanding here, at some level, even if not Peter Mandelson, that there were decisions being taken that they knew would be controversial, if not, in fact, very damaging, and they were telling people, don't mention it.
It wasn't known at the time that he'd campaigned for someone who was known to be a sex offender. It wasn't that is one defence there. What is interesting, Matthew Doyle, you look at Morgan McSweeney, the Prime Minister's, Matthew Doyle, now a Labour peer, well, lost at the Labour line there, but Morgan McSweeney, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, second one, he's lost 2 already, and also Tim Allen, who came in as the Director of Communications, who also left sort of basically apparently because he's got some stuff on his phone that would have made it impossible for him to stay in relation to the Manderson appointment. That's what everyone thinks in Westminster. All of these people, all protégés of Peter Manderson, who's obviously had a very clear role. Now, we talked about it on the show yesterday, in 2023, when Keir Starmer was still leader of the opposition, but looking odds on to become the next Prime Minister. Security, national security officers spoke with him and his team to warn them about Manderson and their concerns. Again, Keir Starmer can't say he didn't know. He absolutely did know there were concerns about Mandelson's business links, China and Russia, etc., etc. Now, the key thing there is that we've now had the likes of Ed Miliband, Net Zero Secretary, who'll talk about a policy decision he's making today, doubling down on net zero because he's insane. But he has been out doing the morning rounds this morning and basically very much distancing himself, saying on Sky Television this morning, when I was leader between 2010 and 2015, I had nothing to do with Manderson. Not a fan, very much more on the left of the party, not a fan of Peter Manderson, but also saying this morning, first revelation of this, that he had expressed concerns about Manderson's appointment to the then Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, and that David Lammy had agreed. Now, we've already known, it's been reported a few months ago that David Lammy had expressed concerns, but he's not said anything publicly. But that's the first confirmation we've had from somebody that he did. But we are talking now about just basically cabinet ministers and quite a few MPs peeling themselves slowly away from the Prime Minister's position. Very noticeable, I thought, yesterday. Let's play some of the clips from yesterday, because it's still very pertinent. Don't think the Prime Minister could just get away with it, because we've now got Olly Robbins evidence. But it was very, very interesting to see the reaction of Labour MPs yesterday. The cheer that you'd expect. Prime Minister under pressure. The Commons Speaker announces at 3:30, the Prime Minister. It was a sort of, it wasn't a sort of rousing cheer. They wanted to hear what the Prime Minister had to say. Certainly, it was a packed chamber. After an hour or so, they started peeling away. But I thought this reaction to something the Prime Minister said, which he clearly had planned to be a very serious point, from MPs across all sides of the House, was very, very telling. Have a watch and a listen.
Across the House will find these facts to be incredible. To that, I can only say they are right. It beggars belief.
Now, those watching on our YouTube page, you'll see the reaction of the Prime Minister was absolute shock and frankly a little bit peeved. He just get very tetchy in these circumstances. He was being laughed at by pretty much everyone in the House. Now, there were lots of questions put by Camille Bay, not 6 in particular, that she'd given to him in advance, who had no excuse, so I can't answer that. I have to say, she did a good job, but not a great job. Tell you who really, really put the knife in, though, was old nemesis of the Prime Minister, Diane Abbott, the mother of the House, the longest-serving female MP in the House. And she put this question to the Prime Minister.
Lisa Manderson has a history, and what this House wants to know is why, knowing Peter Manderson's history, going back now 30 years, and given what has been known, it's one thing to say, as he insists on saying, nobody told me. Nobody told me anything. Nobody told me. The question is, why didn't the Prime Minister ask?
And that's the key thing, isn't it? At the end of the day, Benedict Spence, you know, he can go through all this processology, and we can hear Olly Robbins' version of events in his version. We can hear all of this stuff. At the end of the day, he's a man who's former director of public prosecutions, a former barrister. He's Prime Minister. He wants to appoint his big mate to this role, and he knows loads of security concerns about him, and he doesn't bother asking a single question. I mean, he had less interest than a slug had in this issue.
Yes, and in some ways, actually, this moment encapsulates everything that is diametrically wrong with politics and is fueling the rise of more populist parties. The average person in the street does not care for the proceduralism, for the different boxes that were ticked, that everything was done according to the rules or anything like that. It's that basic lack of common sense. Why didn't you ask? Because that's what anybody would do in that set of circumstances, unless, of course, they were trying to cover their own back because they didn't want to know the answer, so that they couldn't then have to be asked.
They didn't ask because they didn't want to know. But here's the key thing. We know the documentation that's already in the public domain and what's been in front of newspapers and the like, and questions that journalists, senior journalists have put to the Prime Minister's representatives. We know that he knew. It is inconceivable that he did not know about the concerns about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein after he was convicted as a paedophile, about his close business links with Chinese, that the links with dodgy Russians close to Putin, and the KGB and the Chinese authorities probably looking into Manderson, and he didn't care. And the argument, it seems to me, from Olly Robbins, the civil servant who's been sacked for making this appointment, is actually that, look, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, this is what he actually said. He's doing, as you say, civil service speak. His argument is, he was appointed. It was going to happen anyway. They already knew he was a wrong-un, and there was nothing that the vetting had flagged up that he was aware of. He couldn't see the extra vetting that would show he was a wrong-un. One of the things that brings Olly Robbins down, though, is he says he figured he could go ahead with the appointment, tick, 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 not from undue pressure from the Prime Minister's office, but because it was the right thing to do, because there could be mitigating factors to deal with any particular vetting issues. Except he says he didn't see the vetting, and he wasn't told what the vetting issues were, other than just that he had. Well, he was told he was borderline, but they were minded to fail him. But he said, that's fine, I can go ahead. And the Foreign Office is entitled to go ahead and say, thank you for that information, but we're going to appoint him anyway. His view, obviously, being that the Prime Minister was aware of all this and he wanted him to be appointed anyway. But he was going to put mitigating factors in. So, but how can you put those in if you don't know what the issue is?
And again, this is why I say the average person watching this will sit there and go, I don't care that you say that you followed all the rules. The rules are insane. This is not how it should work. And this, again, is why people don't have faith in politics more broadly, but specifically this Prime Minister and this government. They think they're being very clever, and clearly the cleverness has created a system that doesn't work. That's the problem.
And it's all a load of people, again, all gone to the same universities and the same little clique, where they all think this, are like, on this particular point of civil service code, on this point of ministerial code, on this particular legalese. At the end of the day, common sense would tell you Manderson was a big, massive, red flashing neon sign of don't appoint this man to a position where he sees high-level confidential security information. He's dodgy. We already know he's dodgy. He'd been sacked from 2 jobs for lying previously. For the love of God, how much more information did you need to know? And they went ahead anyway. Here's my worry. How many other people are in senior positions in government or with access to confidential documents, security briefings and the like? I mean, Manderson was strapped to be the highest level. He could see stuff that, frankly, Putin would give his right arm for, Xi Jinping would give his right arm for. We have no idea whether they know that information now or not. I'm hoping there's investigation into that. How many other people have been appointed who absolutely should not have been appointed? Because we're told all process was followed, all procedure was followed, there was nothing that anyone did wrong, which is the argument from Olly Robbins, but also, weirdly, the argument from the Prime Minister, whilst accusing Olly Robbins of doing something wrong, which is the mind-blowing, confusing bit. If everything... then how many other times has this happened? Because that is the worry. This is not just about the Prime Minister. This is about our national security being put at risk on the whim of a weak Prime Minister with poor judgment. That is the summary of the situation. I want to hear from you. Give us a call. What do you make of all of this? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate, text charged at the standard network rate. Message. We'll get your messages up next. Lots of top guests to come. We'll bring you any more highlights from what Sir Olly Robbins has to say in a few moments. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:28 is the time. Also, Olly Robbins, that sacked chief official at the Foreign Office, still giving evidence, but a lot of it, frankly, is going over a lot of the same ground. Different MPs asking him pretty much a lot of the same questions. Anything new, we will bring that to you here at Talk. Right now, let's go to your calls, get your reaction, not just to what the Prime Minister had to say yesterday in his defence, but also, of course, what Olly Robbins has said this morning. Peggy is in Essex and wants to have her say on 0344 499 1000. Good morning to you, Peggy.
Good morning, Julia. Well, I've been listening. I listened to yesterday to Keir Starmer.
You're a sucker for punishment, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, it must be. The trouble is, it just proves what a load of mugs they take us for. Absolutely.
Totally.
Absolute mugs. And I've listened to Olly Robinson, and Robbins, from the word go, they wanted Peter Manderson. It's the old boys act once again. Even the King, they said, was mentioned. No one's picked that up yet. The King...
Well, that's just a formal process, because you're representing not the government, you're representing His Majesty's government, so the King has to give approval formally.
Right. So it was all sewn up, but they thought, because he was new in the job, I think, that he's going to sail through. I mean, he might be as green as grass like the rest of them, but the overriding thing is Starmer's a liar, an absolute liar, and they take us for absolute fools. The only way we're going to change this if we get a different government.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, the arrogance. I mean, yesterday, Keir Starmer, I mean, he clearly thought he could get away with that statement. It's a very lawyerly statement. And this idea, you know, I didn't know. Again, I didn't know defence doesn't work. You're a grown man, for the love of God. I mean, he's shown less interest in that than, I mean, any interest at all you could take into, you know, like what your great aunt's best mate had for lunch yesterday. You know, he took less interest than that. You know, I mean, that's the thing. It's absolutely maddening. But on a technicality, he thinks he's got through. But the reality is, lots of the things the Prime Minister said yesterday contradict things that we already know to be true. He's answered questions in the Commons before, where he was asked, did the security vetting advice you saw mention Jeffrey Epstein? And he replied, yes, it did. Well, you said you didn't see the security vetting advice. So how can you say it did or didn't when you claim now you didn't see it? I mean, he'd been caught out by his own lies.
But where would we be without journalists? Because none of this would come through. And, I mean, you wouldn't let Peter Manderson... This goes back 30 years. He was the Prince of Darkness. You wouldn't let him anywhere. You wouldn't even let him go and get your shopping.
I know, I wouldn't trust him with 10 pence.
You just would not. It is so frustrating and aggravating where we're taken for such fools, you know. And
that's actually the real... That's actually the real insight. I mean, other than the national security risk, small point worth making, but actually, the fact that they think, oh, we got away with this, you really haven't, Prime Minister. It was very noticeable, wasn't it? The MPs laughing.
Well, if Diane Abbott made a good speech, when it comes to Diane Abbott saying something sensible, you know we're all stuck.
I think we were all thinking that, were we not? Very good call. Thank you very much, Peggy. Appreciate it. Let's get to some of your messages. Philip says, oh dear, all governments are the same. You think the Conservatives were liars, cheats, full of sleaze? Labour come in saying they're clean and they'll solve things. No, it's exactly the same. They're all the same, just lying and out for their own good. Good time to switch off. Just get on with our own lives. Oh, don't switch off, love. Ian says Starmer has to go. He put national security at risk. Boris was forced out over cake. No, Boris was forced out over forcing a lockdown on the rest of us, which he knew wasn't necessary, which was why he was allowing parties in Number 10. Please, it wasn't over cake. It was the fact that he completely bankrupted the country and stole our fundamental civil liberties for months on end when he knew it wasn't necessary. Well, it was for us, the plebs, but not for him and his team. Never forgive, never forget. Gary says simply, lies, lies, lies. Alex says, I'm sick of these Westminster stories. The government should be stopping the boats, making the cost of living cheaper. Instead, our government is stuck appointing their dodgy mates into top posts. Well, absolutely. Paul is on the line. He's in Cardiff. Hello, Paul.
Morning, Julia.
Morning. Well, then, what do you want to say, love?
What a load of drivel in Parliament yesterday.
Yeah.
And then after that, Ed Millipede came on GMB.
Yeah.
And whether it's right or wrong, he's saying yes because he don't want to lose his job.
What do you mean?
Well, whether the situation is right or wrong, he's agreeing with the Prime Minister, whatever.
Well, he says that he wouldn't have appointed him and he'd steer clear of him. But, but the Prime Minister's already said he wished he hadn't appointed him and has already apologised, he says. There you are. Another laugh that tells it all.
Well, they were all laughing at the Prime Minister yesterday when he said one statement, so that says it all.
That does. I have to say, when people are openly, even from his own benches, laughing at the Prime Minister when he's basically, in a very sticky situation, that's usually the beginning of the end. I would say it's very much the middling to the end of the end. But there we are. Paul, thank you for that. 10:33 is at the time. Benedict Spence, very interesting how many... people. I mean, you can see, Sophie, you can see online, you can see from the Labour benches, the backbenches, Labour MPs are just, what on earth have you done to us?
Yeah, and the question now is going to be, how do they go forward about this? Because it's very clear that they don't believe him, that they understand the damage that he's done. At what point does it stop being about the damage that he's done to Sir Keir Starmer and become the damage that he's done to the Labour Party and the Labour government?
Yeah.
And do they then start to go, now is maybe the time to think about somebody else? They don't want to get rid of him right now because there's a world of pain coming down the road that they'd rather he soak up. But has it in fact got to that point a little early? Are we going to start to see people do more than simply what Ed Miliband did and just say, well, I wouldn't have done it? Are they going to start going further?
Dead man walking. Simple as that. Dead man walking, Prime Minister Keir Starmer. 10:34 is the time. Up next, we get the thoughts of the now independent but former Labour MP, Rosie Duffield. She's up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:36 is the time. Right, let's speak to Rosie Duffield, who's an independent MP, former Labour MP, about what she makes of all the evidence we've heard from Keir Starmer yesterday and Sir Olly Robbins, the sacked chief at the Foreign Office this morning. Good morning to you, Rosie.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Olly Robbins is continuing a lot of these questions, so we're going over a lot of the same ground, and we'd rather sort of carry on the debate here on the show. But I mean, first of all, can I just ask your impressions of how the Prime Minister did yesterday, and were you among those laughing when he talked about how incredible the situation was?
Yeah, I mean, we all burst out laughing several times during that because it was just pitiful, and you're just watching someone drowning and choosing to drown and not reaching out for the lifebuoy and getting out of the water.
How could he have done that?
He just needs to resign. The entire country has been telling him that pretty much from day one. This government only won with 34% of the electorate, so they didn't have a mandate for Keir Starmer as leader. His poll ratings have always been rock bottom.
No, Rosie, I'm sorry. Look, I'm no fan of Keir Starmer or the Labour Party at this current time, but there was a democratic mandate under our system of government. They won a massive
under the
majority.
present system, but it wasn't for Keir Starmer, was it? I mean, okay,
he was the leader of the party. The leader of the biggest party is Prime Minister. He's got a democratic mandate. I'm sorry.
That's absolutely right. No, of course you're right.
You just said he didn't.
He's never been popular with the public. You know, on the doors in the 24 election, his name came up as we need to change but Keir Starmer quite often.
He wasn't the
and
Tories.
He's still there.
Yeah, but we do know a lot of the vote wasn't for Labour. It was not the Tories. They needed a punishment beating, basically.
Yeah.
In terms of how he's handled it, do you think he's going to get away with it, either after what he said yesterday or after Olly Robbins' evidence today, which the summary of which is basically that, look, the appointment was made, it was going to happen anyway, everybody in number 10 in the Cabinet Office already knew everything about Peter Manderson already. I just rubber stamped the approval, which I was entitled to do. I didn't have all the details, but basically no one cared whether he was vetted or not. They just wanted the job done, rubber stamp, and let him go off to Washington.
I mean, yeah, everything I know about the internal Labour circles and nepotism means that was always the case. If Manderson wanted something, he would have got it. All he had to do was imply quite early on that he was interested in that post and that Keir, in that sense, owed him.
Well, OK, now we understand, like Morgan McSweeney, later on Tim Allen, who was Direct Communications, also left, but his former Chief of Staff, and we've got Matthew Doyle, or Doyle, we're now in the business as well. These are all protégés of their big mentor, Peter Manderson, the brilliant, the amazing Peter Manderson, who everyone credits for winning the 97 election. A load of absolute rubbish, by the way. He'd run a load of by-election campaigns, all of which he'd lost. So actually, this idea that he's a great genius is a load of complete tosh anyway. What was the hold that Manderson had on the Prime, or presumably doesn't continue to have, but who knows? What was the hold he had on the Prime Minister? Did Keir Starmer think that he had some sort of gold dust to sprinkle on his premiership, that he was a unique Trump whisperer? What was it he thought that Manderson had that he needed so badly?
All of that. I mean, from my early on experiences of the Labour Party, there were three big figures pretty much that were the kingmakers. One was in charge of policy, sadly no longer with us.
Who's that?
Money. I'd rather not say at this point, to be honest, just protecting myself a bit. It doesn't take a lot of digging by journalists. And one who was Peter Manderson, who made those connections and attended big fundraisers that would attract loads of money for various individual members like Wes Streeting. Yeah. And he decided early on, it was well known, that Keir Starmer was to be the next leader of the Labour Party. So in that sense, that's what he's got over him, I suppose.
Yeah, but again, it's utterly fascinating. Now, it's very, very clear that the Prime Minister has repeatedly lied to Parliament in terms of what he knew when. He's contradicted himself a number of times. He thinks he's being a Mr. Clever lawyer and no one's noticed. But as one of my callers, Peggy, points out, it just proves what a load of mugs and fools they take us for. Do you think that he will be ousted over this?
I'd love to think so. Most of my Labour veteran MP friends would love to think so, but it's the processes. He's obsessed, as we heard yesterday, by processes. The public aren't really interested in that. They're interested in his terrible judgment and why he did this in the first place. And, you know, I go so far as to call it corruption within the party, but there is no easy way of getting rid of this Prime Minister. He seems determined to stay.
I mean, 80 Labour MPs have to publicly named say we want not only for the Prime Minister to resign and vote no confidence in him, they actually have to publicly back one individual figure and do it public. Now, of course, we know some of the big beasts in the party. Your old party, you know, you wouldn't get a say anymore, no longer the Labour Party, but they, you know, the likes of the, you know, the Angie Rayner's, well, you know, she's still trying to get clearance, which may take, frankly, a year and a half or more to get over her unpaid tax bill for her stamp duty on her second home. Frankly, she'd be crazy. She may as well just pay the fine that she is due to pay and then get on with it. Andy Burnham hasn't even got a seat in Parliament. The likes of Wes Streeting, not as popular as the likes of Ed Miliband, hugely popular figure on the left, blows everyone who's sane's mind out of the water that he is. But nevertheless, he's definitely on manoeuvres. This morning, he's making it very clear. He steered well clear of Peter Manderson. He had expressed his concerns to the Foreign Secretary, then David Lammy at the time, about the appointment. David Lammy had agreed with him, but also that he would not have appointed him himself.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's expecting, certainly some of those big names are saying quite openly, they expect to be reshuffled out after the local elections on May the 7th anyway. So they're sort of possibly less reticent to make their intentions clear at the moment. But look, I think it's almost academic. Whoever takes over is taking over for, 2-3 years. I think the public have had absolutely enough of this Labour government and that they don't stand a chance of gaining a huge majority again after the next general election anyway. So in a way, does it matter who leads, you know, between now and the next general election?
That's a very, very interesting point. And can I just say, a very new revelation is that Robbins has been asked if, given everything we know now, he regrets granting security clearance to Peter Manderson, bearing in mind it was within the power of the Foreign Office chief to basically decide and get the vetting advice from the vetting people, and then it's a decision for the Foreign Office, or there are a couple of departments that are allowed to sort of not override, but basically give their decision, as in we already knew all this already, was seemed to be the argument from both Number 10 and the Foreign Office. So, you know, we can grant a security clearance. So Olly Robbins replied, I regret that this process was not done before the announcement of Manderson's appointment. I regret that the due diligence process, which threw up, as I understand it, serious reputational risks, didn't colour the Prime Minister's judgment in making the appointment. There's quite a lot about this situation over the last year and a half I regret. I have no regrets about the work of my brilliant team and the judgment that we came to. So he's still standing by that he did the right thing. He made the right decision. Do you think he's right about that?
I don't think anybody that I know in the Labour Party wanted Mandelson to have the job, but we were this sort of group of people that were ignored by Starmer and his cronies anyway. This was a political appointment. It was done by the sort of cronies and inner circle that Keir Starmer promotes, and it suited his agenda. And I guess it looks as though the Foreign Office officials were made to feel that they had to fit in with that and had to just rubber stamp it. It was never a good decision. We all knew that he was friends with Epstein.
Well, I mean, exactly. I mean, it was very well publicised. There's no doubt at all about this. What do you make of Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader? She's put a post on X, and she was very damning yesterday, but saying the evidence from Olly Robbins is devastating to Keir Starmer. It's clear that Number 10 not only made the appointment before vetting was completed. By the way, this was in direct contradiction of the then Cabinet Secretary Simon Case's clear written evidence that the vetting had to be carried out beforehand, but that Manderson was already acting as the ambassador before the vetting, even seeing highly classified documents. Kemi Badenoch continues, with this and the constant pressure Number 10 applied to the appointment and their dismissive attitude to vetting Manderson, it is now absolutely clear that full due process was not followed. Keir Starmer has misled the House. Now, I think clearly she's suggesting he's misled the House knowingly. Now, knowingly misleading the House is a resigning matter, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm afraid most of us were on Kemi's side yesterday in the chamber. I was with, I sit in my sort of rebel section of the House, and all the different parties that were all there represented on my side were all in agreement with her. You know, she's being absolutely forensic here and not letting him get away with it. And she's a much better politician. He's standing there squirming and she's nailing him. So I think she's going to carry on doing that today.
Well, yes, we've got a debate, I mean, in House of Commons at 12:30. We're not expecting the Prime Minister to turn up to that. He was under some pressure again and again yesterday, lots and lots of different questions, but didn't. We had two MPs from your party and from Reform directly and in contravention of Commons and rules and niceties, calling him a liar. Do you think we're going to see more of that?
Yeah, I suspect that the anger is just growing until he goes, until he resigns, because everyone's just absolutely had enough. I'm watching my former colleagues limping around, you know, in sort of pain, you know, and this has been going on for a very long time. Yeah. We didn't particularly like Keir going into the election, or his people, who were very, very rude and difficult to those of us that had been there for a while. He wanted just his new people, all of the yes men and women, and this is just a continuation of that, really. You've often accused of it being a boys' club, and the Prime Minister, when you were campaigning on issues of, you know, being aware of basic biological facts, he never at any point agreed to even meet with you. No, he's not remotely interested in meeting with women like me. Maybe if you had a penis, he would. I suppose I could manufacture one. I don't know. Apparently 0.1% of us have got one, according to him. I mean, you never know, Rosie. Rosie Duffield, fascinating to talk to. She's a former Labour MP, now sitting as an independent. Not a fan of Keir Starmer, I think we can safely say. Rosie Duffield, thank you very much, Dee, for that. Benedict Spence in the studio listening to that. Look, she's no fan of the Prime Minister's, but I don't think, actually, speaking freely, there'd be many Labour MPs who would say much different to her. No, and I think that, you know, because there are going to be a lot of former Labour MPs who will feel that they can speak openly. I thought, you know, not just obviously Rosie Duffield, but was it Zara Sultana as well? You know, also called the Prime Minister a liar, as well as Lee Anderson, of course, another former Labour MP, doing the same thing. They speak, I think, because they understand that the average person agrees with them. Obviously, the average Labour MP is not going to go that far outwardly, but nonetheless, if they're saying these things openly, there's going to be many like-minded Labour MPs who are going to be sat there going, do you know what? Yeah, these people speak for the general consensus, and that is that the Prime Minister has misled the country. Well, again, a lot of them are going to be in a situation where they're going to need to cover their backs as well. Of course. Look, we're going to keep abreast of what is going on in the House of Commons. We're also going to be talking about something which actually affects our kids in their school days. A full legal ban on phones in school to be implemented in England under new government plans. But does it go far enough? This is Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk. We're going to briefly step away from the shenanigans in the House of Parliament, talk about stuff that actually happens in our daily lives, especially those who've got kids, or maybe you're a teacher, you'll be appreciating this. But the government is to bring in, finally recognise the need to put into law, a ban on phones in schools. It's a recommendation from the Department of Education currently, but as of now, law is going to be brought in that actually no, children cannot have their phones in school. Well, access to the phones anyway. Well, let's talk about this with Arabella Skinner, who's Director at Health Professionals for Safer Screens. Good morning to you, Arabella.
Morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. So what would this new law actually involve? Is this kids putting their phones, into a box and arrive at school, into those sort of bags that seal them, they can't use them, put them into a locker? What would it actually require them to do?
Well, this is the bit, the devil's in the detail, Julia, as you know. It was announced at the dispatch box yesterday by Baroness Smith, and it took everyone by surprise because last week the Minister told us that it was all solved. It didn't need to be a legal statutory law, but they announced it, and at the moment it looks like the current guidance will be turned into the law. And in that guidance they don't explicitly make clear that the policy of no see, no hear is not allowed. That's the policy of allowing children to turn it off and keep it in their bags.
Yeah, which we know doesn't work.
Does not work, and which most schools are doing. So it's absolutely great that they have finally listened and recognised this needs to be legally binding because it supports our head teachers in doing this and pushing back. But instead of just removing it from the guidance, they need to explicitly say that this means that children do not have access. So that could be...
They physically can't touch it.
Exactly. So that could be handing it in. That could be pouches. But of course, this is a cost issue, or lockers. Or it could be saying, actually, no smartphones are allowed in schools. And that means that actually children would use brick phones and use the like, or use the new phones that are created that are not internet enabled.
They just simply, it's very risky. They're going to want to have, parents, let's face it, they're going to want their kids to have smartphones because they use them for lots of other things. I've always just handed on my smartphone, when I'm done with it, it's gone to my daughter. But I know that her school, certainly for years has had the no phones out policy, but apparently, again, kids were just completely flouting it. The simple situation on that is, A, have the pouches or have them handed in, and B, if you do flout it, you're suspended for a week. Second time, you're expelled. Simple message. Parents are told, they're told, is everyone clear? And then you follow the rules. And I'm afraid a couple of kids are going to have to get expelled from each school before everyone will realise that that is a bit of a serious message. But this is also about parents backing this up, because if you find out that your kid has got their phone out at school, you should take the phone away for a month and punish them that way. I mean, this is basically, it's a failure frankly, of good parenting, but it's also a failure of good teaching and good running of a school, because any head teacher who can't stop kids using their phones during the day isn't doing their job.
Well, Julia, a lot of them have very tough times when they're talking to families and parents, and this is why having it legally binding is much easier for parents, because for teachers and parents, because a lot of the head teachers are spending enormous amounts of time and having to put enormous amounts of time into the community and through the primary schools to bring them up to secondary schools. By making it legal, it takes all that out. But then we also get onto the issue around, yes, this solves the issue in schools, but it doesn't solve the issue around social media and the problems we have around that, around outside of schools, which is 80% of the safeguarding issues that teachers are dealing with.
Well, indeed. I mean that's saving kids when they can actually A, get some work done, concentrate, but also B, socialise at school, do school clubs, chat to their friends face to face rather than all be standing around. Nothing more soul destroying. Seeing a bunch of teenagers looking at their phones when they're all together absolutely breaks my heart.
And we know the developmental issues are enormous and the problems there are a nightmare. And so we're hoping they come back to the Commons tomorrow with the details of the amendments, so we'll get a bit more detail on that. And there's also the opportunity to vote to raise the age for social media, because once again that came through in the Lords yesterday.
Well, hold on a minute though, because this is something that's been tried in Australia, and we were told by the government they have got consultation out on this, but they're also going to see how it's worked in Australia. They banned it. Now, we know that the majority of children under 16 still have access to social media in Australia, and part of that is the fact that they already had accounts, their accounts haven't been closed, and they just still continue to have accounts. So a lot of that is going to be down to social media companies. But is that the answer? We know perfectly well that I know that any law you have, people will break. So it's not an argument that some people break the law and will get around it with a VPN or whatever. But we know that most teenagers are far more tech savvy than their parents. They will tell their parents they're not doing anything naughty. They will set up an account that via their parents or whatever, and they will be on social media anyway. Is that going to work, or is actually this far more about, you know, talking to parents about what they should be doing, and also trying to adjust the algorithms that send kids down horrific routes at the social media firm level themselves?
Absolutely. It's a mixture of both, Julia. And the problem is, as a parent, you know, it's really hard to manage this.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Well, elements are when there are other areas. But when you're talking about it, there not being children on access on it, I think we need to reframe this. This is about not letting our tech companies have access to our children until they produce a safe product. And don't tell me that tech companies cannot sort out age verification. If they were motivated enough to do that, they could do that.
The trouble with that is that would require adults to prove their age as well, and that's when you get into freedom
there
issues.
There are other areas where they can manage it and they can do this. And the difference we've managed it with pornography. The difference is we're going to be talking about highly effective. It has significantly gone down for children. It's not sorted enough. And the biggest problem we've got at the moment is we have this whole safe harbour that if a company doesn't do it, then Ofcom gives them a little space. They then give them a fine. They then get ignored. So if we are going to have rules, we have to be strict and we have to make it really tough for those tech firms. And the argument in Australia is that actually the tech firms are ignoring it. They're doing bits and pieces because it's not highly effective. And they are only halfway through the process in Australia in doing it. And they're coming down tougher and harder. And these tech firms, calling the tech firm into number 10 and saying, do a little bit better, guys. That's not going to make a difference.
Another round table with Keir Starmer. The very good point. They're making a hell of a lot of money out of all of our kids. Arabella Skinner, great to talk to you. I hope you'll come back on the show. Director at Health Professionals, for Safer Screens. Appreciate that. Through a whole way through that, I'd like to point out Benedict Spencer's been sitting in the studio checking his phone. To be fair, you're keeping up to date on what is going on in the House of Commons. But
you've just done me so dirty. I was actually trying to stay up to date with what's going on.
Perfectly legit. No, you were doing
I was playing Candy Crush the whole time.
You were doing something perfectly legitimate, and that's the thing. And I'm often genuinely, I'm into, but I've got to keep an idea, or I've got to message my producers. But the key thing is kids shouldn't be doing that in school. You're in a maths lesson, you need to be talking about maths.
Absolutely, and I do. It constantly amazes me that we know that we haven't got to this point earlier. I would have just thought it would have been a blanket ban. Obviously, I understand it's difficult to enforce, but that should be the standard because children, they will get distracted. They're not all paying attention to what the Prime Minister is saying.
No.
Frankly, it might be more worthwhile not to listen to what the Prime Minister has to say, but still.
I told a couple of girls on the tube home the other day because they spent an entire 20 minutes taking photos of themselves and just posing this. And I said to them, you've no idea how utterly repulsive this is to watch. I'm actually embarrassed for you. If you were my child, I would have taken your phone away by now and locked you in your bedroom. They looked at me like I was the nutter I actually was. But there we are. More about Olly Robbins and the Prime Minister and Manderson up next. This is Talk.
This is a scandal, as you say. If the Prime Minister's knowingly lied, any minister, whether it's the most important
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. Fast approaching 3 minutes past 11. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you so much for joining me. Now, we're keeping abreast of what Sir Olly Robbins, the ousted chief of the Foreign Office, is having to say to the House of Commons. That's now heading well into its second hour. We took the first hour fully live, but I have to say a lot of the questions are kind of going over the same territory. He was very, very clear in a letter he issued to the Emily Thornberry, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, at the very, very start of his evidence session, that he was going to be restricted in what he had to say. Now, he's very clear. What he's going to say is kind of what he has already said. But there's no doubt at all, it is bombshell stuff, and especially after the Prime Minister was pretty much laughed out of the chamber, you could say, by even his own MPs with his version of events on what he did and what he didn't know about the vetting for Peter Manderson. Just to remind everybody, in case you've been living under a stone for the last year or so, Peter Manderson, a man who had been sacked twice for being a liar from 2 government jobs, who was known to be close pals with a convicted paedophile, Jeffrey Epstein, about whom the security services already expressed to Keir Starmer their concerns about his close links with Chinese companies and Russian companies with close links with Putin and Xi Jinping. Well, he was appointed as our ambassador to the United States. Why? Well, that's the big mystery, isn't it? Somehow it was thought that he was the Trump whisperer. He was going to be the man who was going to basically really, really sort out UK-US relations once it was realised that the next president of the United States was going to be Donald Trump. So what happened then? Well, the Prime Minister and his office decided to basically make the announcement about that appointment. They made the announcement back in December 2024, despite the fact that Peter Manderson hadn't undergone any vetting at that point, despite the fact that the then Cabinet Secretary, Simon Case, had actually recommended in letter, formal, it's all been published, that, yes, you can make this political appointment, Prime Minister, but he'll have to undergo proper vetting and clearance before he is appointed. And as we have heard from Sir Olly Robbins in his evidence today, basically when he became the chief at the Foreign Office, the Parliamentary Undersecretary at the Foreign Office, so the number one there, back on the 20th of January 2025, bearing in mind that was the date of the inauguration of Donald Trump in his second term as president. Developed vetting, as it's called, DV, for Peter Manderson was already underway. But, as he pointed out, due diligence, effectively assessing reputational suitability and checks whether these are candidates fit to serve, had already been completed by the Cabinet Office, and obviously they felt happy with that. Approval of the appointment had already been given by the King. The appointment had been publicly announced a whole month earlier. There had been a formal diplomatic process which had started asking for approval from the US and been given that approval because, it's from the head of state to the head of state. Donald Trump's people had been checked with. The Foreign Office had already given access to Peter Manderson to the building. He had basic IT access, and extraordinarily, he'd already been granted access to highly classified briefings on a case-by-case basis, even though he hadn't yet passed vetting. And Olly Robbins made it very, very clear that it was a case of when, not if, Manderson passed his vetting. He claims that he was told by the Advanced Vetting People Developed Vetting Office, UK DV. He was told that it was a borderline case and they were minded not to approve vetting for Peter Manderson. But he, as the Foreign Office chief, was entitled to make a decision himself, and he made the decision because quite clearly he was under a lot of pressure from both Number 10, Keir Starmer's office, and the Cabinet Office, which also reports, who are we kidding, to the Prime Minister. Almost daily phone calls were being made by private secretaries to other private secretaries saying, when are you going to get this done? When are you going to give the approval? We need Manderson in post by the time that Trump starts. Weirdly, not many records of many of these phone calls at all, rather strangely. But it is very clear Olly Robbins is still standing by his decision. He was right to make the decision. It was kind of already a done deal anyway. He was right not to tell anybody, even when the Prime Minister was going on the telly and talking in the House of the Commons and saying that all due process had been followed. He did not think to contact even his own Cabinet Secretary, his line manager, to say to him, actually, we kind of went to a different kind of process this time round. It wasn't the normal process. He still insists that it was normal. I don't think anyone actually does think that was the case. Let me tell you a couple of little clips of what Sir Olly Robbins has had to say. In particular, it's first of all, this is about, well, whether or not the Cabinet Office, basically handling this matter, even believed there was a need to do any vetting of Peter Manderson. Have a watch and a listen.
The position taken from the Cabinet Office was that there was no need to vet Manderson. He was a member of the House of Lords. He was a Privy Councillor. The risks that attending his appointment were well known and had been made clear to the Prime Minister before appointment. Now, in the end, the FCDO insisted and put its foot down. I understand my predecessor had to be very firm in person. But that was a live debate at the point of announcement, and I think it's important to make that clear to the committee.
He's also said, talking about the Manderson vetting being a borderline case. I don't know how it could possibly be borderline. What the hell would a non-borderline case of security vetting fail be? But here's what he had to say about that.
I was briefed that UKSV considered Manderson a borderline case, and that they were leaning towards recommending that clearance be denied, but that the Foreign Office's Security Department assessed that the risks identified as of highest concern by UKSV could be managed and or mitigated. I was also told that the risks did not relate to Manderson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and that I was told that UKSV acknowledged, I don't know in what way, but acknowledged that the Foreign Office might wish to grant clearance with appropriate risk management.
Appropriate risk management, a risk management of somebody who apparently wasn't a concern that he was best pals, in his own words, with a convicted paedophile billionaire Jeffrey Epstein. And we all know now what the police investigation into that relationship involves. The allegation, of course, he's denied any wrongdoing, Peter Manderson, but the allegation, nevertheless, that he would have passed vital government information when he was a minister in Gordon Brown's government back in 2009 to that convicted paedophile. Just quite extraordinary to me. Benedict Spence is joining me in the studio, Conservative commentator. It's quite extraordinary to me that Peter Manderson, well, A, Number 10 didn't really care about the vetting. B, the Prime Minister ignored the express instructions of his then Cabinet Secretary to get the vetting done before he made the appointment and the announcement. Even though Keir Starmer now says, but the next Cabinet Secretary, Sir Chris Wilmot, he gave a different interpretation of that rule. Yeah, but that was after you'd sacked Peter Manderson, not when you made the appointment. You'd have to go with the advice you were given by your Cabinet Secretary then. I mean, I know this gets very nitty-gritty, but it is relevant. But the fact that no one seemed to care whether he'd been vetted or whether he passed the vetting, how the hell does being mates with a paedophile billionaire, who there are so many questions about anyway, how does having close business links, having made millions from Chinese companies who by definition have links with the Chinese president, a hostile nation state, basically spending every other weekend, as far as I can tell, on Deripaska's yacht, a billionaire, when he was European Commissioner. I mean, clear conflicts of interest there, and he's being investigated over that as well, over some criminal wrongdoing alleged there. How on earth could any of that made him, quote, a borderline case?
As you say, what on earth would you have actually... Would you have had to have been caught selling state secrets to somebody for them to go, maybe this isn't a great...
Maybe advertising them online. State secrets for sale.
Or found pushing somebody onto
wrongdoing, I have to say.
Pushing somebody onto a railway track or something. Like, what actually is the criteria? I'd like to know.
Caught with a prostitute?
No.
Actually, is there a video with a prostitute?
With a prostitute? No, there have to be at least 3 for it to not be a borderline
Maybe killing someone in cold blood, but on video.
And that would depend very much on who it was and the circumstances.
How low is the bar to be an ambassador representing our country? And by the way, this isn't a load of silly nonsense wearing fancy clothes and bowing and scraping in a palace. That's not what this is about. This is about the people who represent our economic security and defence interests abroad, have access his job, he would have had access to American intelligence, not just our intelligence. You are super senior and with access to extraordinarily confidential information that could put our nation at risk if you divulged it. But no, not a risk, apparently.
Honestly.
What the hell?
It almost makes you wonder what on earth the actual established career diplomats aren't doing right, that none of them was quite as good as this man with all of this baggage.
And the woman in the post then was largely regarded as
pretty good.
Pretty good, yeah.
There was it was met with some consternation that she wouldn't be given the role. But honestly,
mates with a paedophile.
this is the thing. Oh, the wrong kinds of paedophiles or the right kinds of paedophiles. Depends on who they are then friends with, clearly. Honestly, the thing is, step back away from all the legalese, all the jargon, all the procedure, and everything that is being used to try to obfuscate or to try to cover backs. Most people will simply go back to what you and I have just touched upon, which is the Prime Minister made this man his ambassador. It was a catastrophic error of judgment. And it doesn't really matter how he tries to cover it. That is what he will now be remembered
his argument
for.
is, I didn't mislead the House of Commons. He didn't apologise yesterday, the Prime Minister. He didn't apologise to us, the public, lying to us or misleading the House. He claims he didn't mislead the House. He claims he was misled. Let's have a little listen to I mean, this extraordinary moment, because the laughter that went on in the House of Commons, it wasn't just from Tory benches or Lib Dems or, or your party, whatever they're called this week, or the Reform. This was on all sides of the House. Absolute explosion of laughter at the Prime Minister, jeering at him, when the Prime Minister said this.
I know many members across the House will find these facts to be incredible. To that, I can only say they are right. It beggars belief.
I mean, and it does, and there was more laughter to that as well. I've yet to watch it on the YouTube page. You can actually see David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister, former Foreign Secretary, and the Chancellor Rachel Reeves sitting there, absolutely stony face, and you just know they were trying so hard not to laugh. But there was a lot of detailed forensic questioning from Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, and she's been very critical. She said again and again he has lied. But it was actually... and this is shocking to everybody, it was actually Diane Abbott, the mother of the House, the longest-serving MP, Labour MP, that she's the one who actually kind of really put it in rather layman's terms. This is what she had to say.
Peter Manderson has a history, and what this House wants to know is why, knowing Peter Manderson's history, going back now 30 years, and given what has been known, it's one thing to say, as he insists on saying, nobody told me. Nobody told me anything. Nobody told me. The question is, why didn't the Prime Minister ask?
Now you can hear a very loud yes from the chamber there, Benedict Spence, and that's the crucial thing. The whole Prime Minister's defence is, I know nothing, I didn't know, I wasn't told. And isn't it terrible? That's why he sacked Olly Robbins as the chief of the Foreign Office, having been a very loyal civil servant for years, very much, rising to the top, Mr. Bag Carrier, Mr. Europhile, negotiator for the Brexit deal under Theresa May. No, suddenly that career is over because he didn't tell the Prime Minister something which Olly Robbins says, I was actually not allowed under the rules to tell you. No one actually believes that. I think that's an absolute load of trollop nonsense from Olly Robbins. But no one believes the Prime Minister either because he didn't ask.
And ultimately, whatever we may think of Olly Robbins, the buck stops with the Prime Minister. This was his appointment, ultimately. And if you're sort of sat there, knowing everything that was known, take aside what he says he didn't know, but what was known about Peter Mandelson, you might think at some point he might sit up one evening whilst he's going through his ministerial boxes and think, hang on a second, wasn't there something that I forgot to ask? Wasn't there something kind of important about this man that I'm literally pushing as fast as possible into this very, very important role? One of two things. Either he didn't ask because he knew Olly Robbins wasn't going to tell him and he thought, that gives me plausible deniability, or
that's
he's
just playing a lawyerly game.
Exactly. Or he's thick. Which one is it? It doesn't really matter.
But this is the thing I find. Why didn't he care? Why didn't he think it mattered that Peter Manderson had clearly got 3 massive red flags? One of which alone would have been enough to mean that he shouldn't be in that role. How did Olly Robbins? It's extraordinary. In his evidence, he's saying there were mitigating factors. It was fine to appoint the ambassador because there could be mitigating factors, and yet he said he doesn't know He didn't see the vetting. He doesn't know what the actual risks were, but it wasn't Jeffrey Epstein related. It was something else. So was it China? Was it Russia? Emily Thornberry, the committee chair, tried to get out of him. Was it something that's not yet in the public domain? And he wouldn't actually answer that question. I think that it probably was something that wasn't in the public domain. God forbid what that is. I mean, seriously though, I mean, the mind boggles. But if that were the case, there could be mitigating factors. You could put things in so you would, he would be you protect certain information because he couldn't see it. But you can't have our most senior ambassador being somebody there's that question of judgment over. Seriously, was he the only person in the entire country, inside or outside the Foreign Office, who could have been trusted to do that job? And as it was, he didn't do a very good job, did he? I mean, it's just extraordinary. Now, just to summarise what Olly Robbins has had to say, though, he says number 10 applied, in his words, constant pressure to the Foreign Office to clear the appointment, had no interest in the actual vetting. The message was, he says, get this done. The Cabinet Office argued there was no need to vet Manderson at all. It was the Foreign Office that said, yeah, there needs to be security vetting. He said that number 10 took what he called a dismissive approach to the vetting process, constant chasing from his Starmer's private office in number 10 over Manderson's vetting. Again, Manderson was given access to higher classification briefings before he was granted security clearance. But also, extraordinary, Robbins directly contradicted Starmer's claim that he would not have appointed Manderson if he had known he failed his vetting. Robbins says it would have been very difficult to block him given the pressure from number 10. Again, the appointment had been announced, the King had been informed, the agreement had been secured with the US, etc., etc. And he said that blocking Manderson's appointment would have damaged US-UK relations and caused issues with the Donald Trump administration. I mean, it's just extraordinary. But also, incredibly, Keir Starmer also tried to get his then Director of Communications, Matthew Doyle, now Lord Doyle, an ambassadorship, telling Robbins, it's claimed, not to inform the then Foreign Secretary David Lammy. I mean, this is if you wrote this Hollywood script, you wouldn't believe it. Robbins resisted on the grounds that Matthew Doyle didn't have the credentials to become an ambassador. Neither did Peter Mandelson. Doyle was subsequently found, of course, we know, to have given public support to a sex offender, alleged but not actually convicted at that point in an election, and is no longer sitting on the Labour benches. Again, I mean, they just randomly keep finding people who are busy maids with suspected or convicted paedophiles and wanting to give them ambassadorships.
Yeah.
I mean, this is borderline a fetish at this point.
I suppose one ambassador with a friendship with a paedophile might be considered unfortunate, but two does rather look a little careless, if not in fact deliberate. And we're sort of sat here thinking, well, what on earth is this vetting that says everything's borderline? Is it approved? Is it not? It is very much Schrodinger's vetting, and that actually nobody seems to be quite sure. You've got the Prime Minister saying it was a mistake and there was no pressure, and then the other one saying, no, there was lots of pressure, but it was not a mistake. What on earth are we supposed to make of this? It's a complete mess. And the key thing here is nobody believes the Prime Minister. That's what it all comes back to.
Well, let's play a little clip now. There were two MPs who basically ignored the niceties of Commons procedure. You know the way you always say you ask something the Speaker. You don't say you don't refer to another MP by name but by their constituency. But you're also not allowed to accuse someone of being drunk or lying. I remember the old Commons Speaker Betty Boothroyd rather fabulously once accusing an MP of saying, "You, sir, have had a very long lunch," which was code for you're pissed and you need to leave. You're being loud. But we had Lee Anderson, the Reform MP, who is interesting actually, is their chief whip. He's in charge of parliamentary discipline for the Reform MPs. I've lost track of how many they've got at the moment. But he got up and he was having none of it. Parliamentary niceties, no. This is what he had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The problem the Prime Minister's got is no one believes him. The public don't believe him. The MPs on this side of the House don't believe him. His own gullible backbenchers don't believe him. So does the Prime Minister agree with me? He's been lying.
Prime Minister, sorry, we don't use those words, and I'm sure the members withdrawn it.
Mr. Speaker, I have the greatest respect for you and your office, but I will not withdraw. That man couldn't lie straight in bed.
No, order. Mr. Anderson, you'll have to leave.
And you've got to love it. You couldn't lie straight in bed. But then it's all Zora Sultana basically getting in on the act from the left of your party, saying the same thing. But I couldn't bear listening to her voice, I'm afraid. That was, I couldn't do it. So we played out Lee Anderson instead. But, I mean, I think the general public will be saying, well, yeah.
Yeah, they're certainly speaking, I think, for the attitude of most people. And, of course, they're speaking for a lot of actual Labour backbenchers who, of course, will not say these things out loud, not simply because it's parliamentary procedure not to say them, but even in, you know, in private, they won't say this because, of course, they're thinking about their own careers right now. But it is getting to that stage, isn't it, where you're wondering, right, how much damage is Starmer being in position doing, not just to himself, but to the party generally? And that does come a point at which you have to say, well, OK, we don't want to get rid of him because
the damage of an election is bad,
he's a really useful human flak jacket right now, but there comes a point where the flak jacket doesn't work.
Well, we've got, I mean, predictions, the local elections, we've got regional elections. No, I've offended loads of people now. I don't mean about that. The Scottish parliamentary elections, and I take it back. I take it back. Rewind. Scottish parliamentary elections and the Welsh Assembly elections. Now, but you know, Labour has run Wales since forever. And they are very likely to lose. Looks like it could be Plaid, possibly, in coalition somewhere, but Reform coming up, looking like the second in Scotland again. It was looking a year or two ago, could have actually easily been Labour retaking Scotland from the SNP. Now it's looking like a clear SNP landslide again, but with Reform, not Labour, as the opposition. I mean, these are extraordinary times. But also local elections in England, we're looking at Labour losing some 1,600 seats at local elections in their best case scenario. Polls showing that 3 in 4 Brits say things are getting worse and not better. We had a scintilla of good economic news from before the Iran conflict started in terms of unemployment going ever so slightly down, but still around the 5% mark, which is historically in last decade or two very high. Certainly, I mean, you know, many European countries would dream of such low unemployment. But again, our unemployment is completely masked by the fact there's a load of people who are claiming disability and sickness benefits who should be on those unemployment rolls. But not looking good. It is very noticeable, though. Labour bench is not only laughing at the Prime Minister, not a loud cheer for him when he walked into the chamber yesterday. Not many going out on the airwaves, and those who do on social media defending the Prime Minister, oh, storm in a teacup. I mean, they are roasted within seconds.
Yes.
I'm not entirely sure that social media is necessarily representative, but nevertheless. But you've got the left and the right in Parliament criticising the Prime Minister, accusing him of lying and saying he should go. He's never had a particular, shall we say, sort of backing. He hasn't got his own constituency of support in the Commons. We know that we've got the Andy Burnhams, if he could become an MP in time, Angela Rayner, the former Deputy Prime Minister, Wes Streeting, their Health Secretary, Ed Miliband, the Net Zero Secretary, all of them and many others all vying, wanting to be the next leader. Lots of them wanting to bide their time for after the local elections, but also Burnham's case, actually getting back into Parliament so he can run. Angela Rayner waiting for HMRC to clear her over her unpaid tax. I don't think they will clear you, love, because you should have paid your tax, you need to pay your fine and shuffle off into the darkness. But I'm old-fashioned on integrity. Here we are. But the reality is a lot of people who still think that Starmer is A, should go because he's lied, B, the public don't like him, C, you can't rescue this premiership now. They also don't want to see an Ed Miliband premiership. He was leader of the Labour Party for 5 years. What happened in the 2015 election after a coalition? A Tory majority government. He's already been tested by the public and found wanting. He is undoubtedly the most sort of zealous follower of net zero, in borderline religious hysteria on it. Today, we'll talk about this a little bit later in the show, doubling down on his net zero madness, which is putting us in the position where we're the hardest hit G7 economy over the oil crisis and the spike in oil and gas prices as well as the Iran conflict. So there are a lot of people in the party who would like to see Keir Starmer go, but go, hold on a minute, could the alternative be even worse?
Well, I think that that's a very real fear, and this is ultimately why he became Labour leader, because what came before him was Jeremy Corbyn, and everybody remembers how spectacularly well that went. And he was tasked, not in fact with becoming Prime Minister straight off the bat, but simply, simply cleaning up, detoxifying the party. In many ways, it's staggering that having done such a relatively good job of that, he missed the most toxic element of the new Labour project, which, of course, you know, Corbyn was a reaction against in terms of Peter Mandelson. But yes, you're right. looking at this sort of real rogues gallery of people that you could pick, there are a couple there that I genuinely think could rescue their position, or at the very least get it back into a respectable one.
Wes Streeting could.
Wes Streeting, I think Shabana Mahmood increasingly talks a big game, but this is the thing. This is the point. Those two names that we've just mentioned, they haven't got a hope in hell.
No.
They're not going to be the ones that are picked. It's going to be a Miliband. It's going to be an Angela Rayner.
I think it's going to be good. Listen, I'm sorry.
Or at least an ally.
Sorry, Benedict. Have you been under a rock for the last 5, 10, 20, 100 years?
Yes.
Labour only elect white, straight men as their leaders. That's the law. Did you not hear that? They bleat on about everybody else, about their quotas and their targets and their diversity. When it comes to their own leaders, it's got to be a white, straight man.
Do you know what, though? Genuinely, things might have got so bad that they might be that desperate to just go, a woman? Why not try that?
I mean, that sort of craziness will never catch
Have you seen how they're polling right now?
I, by the way, could not care less whether someone's sexuality, their sex, or anything like that. However, they claim to care a lot about it. And my God, they'll never elect a woman. But there we are.
I think there's a good chance it's somebody with a fringe. I'm not going to say who. That's just all I'm saying.
Put that down. 11:28 is the time. I want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. Number 10 had no interest in whether Peter Manderson passed vetting or indeed was vetted at all. That is the claim of the sacked Foreign Office Chief Sir Olly Robbins. What's your reaction to that? Do you think the Prime Minister survives? If so, why? How? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Get in touch on text at 87222. You can message us on X at talkTV. You can also charge the national rate. Text costs £1 instead of network rate message. And if you can think of, I don't know, anyone in the country who's a better bet to be our US ambassador, I would love to know who it is, because I think we might be able to find somebody who's not got close links to two of our main enemies around the world and isn't best mates with a convicted paedophile. Surely there's somebody. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Right, coming up, we are going to get to your calls, 0344 499 1000, about, well, what you make of just the extraordinary evidence we've had over the last couple of days, various statements. The Prime Minister and, of course, Olly Robbins still been giving evidence for the last 2.5 hours in the House of Commons to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Right now, we're joined by the journalist and broadcaster Adam Bolton to give his verdict. A very good morning to you, Adam.
Good morning, Julia.
Now, we're not in the studio together, so we can't actually come to blows this time, I hope. So we'll see how this goes. OK, first of all, let's talk about Sir Olly Robbins and what he had to say today. Because basically his argument is, look, I came into the job, 2 weeks before all this decisions had to be made. Everybody, number 10, Cabinet Office, everyone expected me to basically give this a rubber stamp and pass it through. No one cared about whether he'd passed the vetting or not. It was up to me. I didn't have the right to tell anyone. I did my job. All processes followed. Job done. Is that a good enough defence?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's one difference from what you said. What he actually said was, I came into the job and the decision had already been made and announced by the Prime Minister. And I do think that is fairly crucial because he basically said that, he was a senior civil servant. His job was to make life easy for the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister wanted this appointment, knowing, as Olly Robbins said this morning, many of the drawbacks about Peter Mandelson. And he took the judgment that those drawbacks could be managed and that was his job to take the final decision on whether they could be managed. And I have to say, you may not like it, but that to me sounds like a pretty credible defence of what someone in Olly Robbins' position should have been doing, expressed very articulately. And I think what he certainly claimed throughout his evidence was for the Prime Minister to say it was unimaginable and he was furious and outraged that he wasn't informed about this particular part of the process. I don't think it really stood up from the way that Olly Robbins, who, let's be honest about it, has far more experience of Whitehall and government than the Prime Minister, how things work. And I come down to it. We had a discussion about it before, but the root of this was a decision by the Prime Minister to appoint the highly controversial Peter Mandelson. That has blown up in his face, but he seems determined to blame anybody. I mean, Olly Robbins actually said when he was discussing the process of dealing with Peter Mandelson, referring to himself, he said, one scapegoat is enough. And I think that was a clear view.
That he is being scapegoated. Well, he's not the only scapegoat, because Chris Wilmot, the Cabinet Secretary, we had the Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, and also choosing to fall on his sword, we are told. We also had Tim Allen, a former Director of Communications. We were told it's going over his WhatsApp messages. Morgan McSweeney's WhatsApp, of course, all conveniently disappeared with his phone being stolen. We've now got 4 scapegoats for this decision by the Prime Minister. But this is the key thing. Olly Robbins' defence. Now, I think it's possible to criticise both the Prime Minister and everyone at number 10 and Sir Olly Robbins for his decision, because his argument was that he quite properly didn't see why there was what he was told, he believed at the time, a borderline vetting issue in terms of whether or not Manderson should be appointed. I mean, we're all flabbergasted he was borderline. What the hell are the clear no's when it comes to vetting, given the stuff we know in the public domain about Peter Mandelson? He won't say whether it was something new or something we already know, whether it was Jeffrey Epstein, China links, Russian links or the like. But he said he thought he could make the approval because he was already doing the job anyway. He was going to get the job. No one cared about the vetting. They didn't.
No, because the Prime Minister wanted
it. But his thing was, as you said, he was going to mitigate it. But how could he have claimed he could mitigate, as in basically put in safeguards because of the vetting concerns when Manderson was in the job, if he, as he said categorically, repeatedly this morning, didn't know what those issues were?
Right, OK, let's unpack that a bit. First of all, this is not disputed. The red flags or the borderline issues were not related to Epstein, which everyone now sees as being the basic reason. So that was a failure all through the system. The Prime Minister knowing about Epstein when he announced the appointment, the system deciding that Epstein at that stage was not an absolute bar. And of course, what we now know, the most damaging stuff about Epstein in political terms, the leaking of government documents when a minister and the taking money of him at the time of the appointment was not known by anybody. That only came out of the Epstein files. So the issues that were raised were apparently about Peter Mandelson's business links, specifically, we believe, with China and Russia. And that related to Peter Mandelson's investment in the company he had, Global Counsel. Now, what Olly Robbins suggested, although he didn't go into any details, because, I mean, the extraordinary thing is he says he didn't see the detail of this, but just the issues that were raised. He didn't even see the red flags or the green flags or whatever. He says that he discussed at length with Mandelson what should be done about handling his shareholding, his divestment from the company, the removal, if you like, of him having any reason to take a decision to benefit his clients rather than to benefit the country. And he believed he could mitigate that. And, you know, I have to say, this is something that I can see a permanent secretary of the Foreign Office very often having to deal with. You know, someone says you might be a good ambassador to France. What about that little place you've got in Paris? Is that, you know what I mean?
It's like an MP on the register of interest, having to register where they've got a personal financial or personal interest in something and having to declare it and either sell their shares, like American presidents supposed to, you know, sell their shares or have blind trusts and the like.
Or not, in the case
of Donald Trump. OK, so you, as far as you're concerned, you think that Sir Olly Robbins, actually, his line of defence, as I was quite impressed by how much human he spoke. He was actually very, you know, he wasn't talking in sort of civil service gobbledygook at all. It's very understandable for us ordinary mortals that actually his line of defence is believable. And I suppose, in the words of the Prime Minister, you could say not incredible, as his explanation has been.
Well, I've certainly seen a number of comments on social media saying if you had to choose between Sir Olly Robbins and Sir Keir Starmer, you know which knight you'd go with. So I think, you know, public opinion may well be on Sir Olly Robbins' side. And I have to say there is one extraordinary aspect to this. We wouldn't be here, we wouldn't be discussing this if the late night decision had not been taken to fire Sir Olly Robbins by the Prime Minister. And, you know, you could disagree with the way he did his job, but to me, and I think most people looking on, he didn't do anything so outrageous, dishonourable or incompetent that the Prime Minister is justified in firing him. And Olly Robbins was quite clear in his hearing that, you know, he will be going before employment tribunals and he's got to work this out. And you've already listed the number of people who have been eased out by the Prime Minister when things have gone wrong. And, you know, one has to wonder whether firing Olly Robbins, who, as he listed, has worked successfully for a succession of Prime Ministers, wasn't just the latest blunder.
Yet again, a very foolish blunder, it may seem. Well, he's finished giving evidence now after these 2.5 hours. But one of the things he did say near the end was he does not fully understand the reasons why he was sacked. He said, as a human being, I'm desperately, desperately sad about it. He said, I love that job. I love that institution. I was proud to serve this government and any government that might follow it. I hope I was doing it to the best of my ability. It is interesting because he was sacked yesterday formally, told in advance, but the written sacking letter came yesterday on his birthday, which seems a little bit on the harsh side. So, but here's the thing. The Prime Minister is obviously relying on the fact, look, I didn't know. I wasn't told, and his line of defence after he sacked Manderson as ambassador was, you know, if I'd known back then when I appointed him what I know now, I would never have appointed him, blaming anybody and everybody else. The trouble is, we know that he did know then when he appointed him pretty much everything that he knew at the point when he sacked him, other than what came out in the Epstein files. But the Lord Manderson's relationship and close friendship and staying in his home while he was convicted for underage, you know, trafficking an underage girl for prostitution. He knew about that. We know it had been in the public domain, and he was informed of it in a document by his own office. He saw that particular aspect of not official vetting, but vetting. We knew that he knew, and he'd been warned by the security services way back in 2023 about concerns about Manderson's business links in China and Russia, and this had also been flagged in the media. So he did know everything. Is this enough for us to say that the Prime Minister, against what he said yesterday in the House, did mislead the House and, crucially, did so knowingly, which is a breach of the ministerial code and a resignation matter?
Look, I think if the Prime Minister had made the statement yesterday that he appointed Peter Mandelson and it was a mistake and it wasn't anyone else's fault, it was just a prime ministerial decision that went wrong and prime ministers have taken decisions. I think if he'd done that back in September, this would have all gone away by then. But he didn't do it. He chose to blame other people, to say, I didn't know, got rid, first of all, of, pointed the finger very strongly at Morgan McSweeney, who'd been the architect of Labour's electoral success. So, he has chosen to go on blaming people. And he's only yesterday, really for the first time, owned, frankly, something which might be an honest mistake. Now, he may feel angry because, oh, well, he never really knew much about Peter Mandelson. He only came into Parliament in 2015. He didn't really like the smell of him. But on the other hand, his mate Morgan McSweeney told him that it would be a good idea to make the bold decision to appoint Peter Mandelson. I have to say the biggest justification I've seen for appointing Peter Mandelson was the one in the Sunday Times from my colleague Matthew Syed saying you needed to send a snake into the snake pit of Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only argument.
Yeah. Now, the point is that whether or not Sir Keir Starmer paid enough attention to this appointment, he wanted to make it and he wanted to boast about it. So he's the person, he's the Prime Minister. He has to own this decision. And I think it's perfectly survivable. You do make mistakes. No,
but people don't mind people making mistakes. Adam, here's the issue. Okay, I'm going to just to correct you. Morgan McSweeney was not the architect of Labour's victory. The last few Tory governments were the architect of Labour's victory in 2024. I don't think he can take much credit for that. But this is the thing. People are very forgiving. We understand that prime ministers are human beings. They're going to make mistakes, and a prime minister makes 15 different decisions a day. He's going to he or she is going to get a couple wrong, and it's just about making. And we can't. One of the defences that the cabinet ministers have been giving in the last few days is, but he made the right decision when it came to around the big decision. But the key thing is, this isn't about appointing some bloke to some job. He wasn't being appointed as a Downing Street janitor, for goodness sake. It wasn't his hairdresser. He was appointing a man who was going to have the highest level clearance to see the top level security, defence, diplomatic, economic information affecting this country. A man who was already, forget what we saw in the Epstein files and the subsequent criminal investigation. Manderson denies any wrongdoing and need to stay. But what we knew already meant that having a man who had already lied twice, been sacked twice from ministerial jobs, relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, everything that was already in the public domain, each of those things alone, let alone combined, were enough to stop him being put in that role. This was an appointment by the Prime Minister to someone who was a national security risk. And that was not forgivable.
Well, I think at the time he could have dismissed it as a mistake. I think now that it's gone on so long and so much has been exposed, it's much more damaging to the Prime Minister making that mistake. And, I don't want to rehearse this, but at the time that the Prime Minister made the appointment, he could also say, yes, there are all these questions about Peter Mandelson's background. On the other hand, he has been Trade Secretary twice. He's represented the European Union on trade at the highest level. And he has a record of knowing how to deal with tricky customers, which Trump
Yeah, because he's mates with a load of them. I just don't think that's going to fly.
That's the plus side. I mean, look, as you know, and there's no point in arguing about this again, I felt, on the basis of what we knew about Peter Mandelson, that it was a gamble worth taking.
Yeah.
That clearly was a mistake, but it was a mistake because largely what we've discovered subsequently from the Epstein files,
Yeah, but again, no, it was a gamble worth taking, not a gamble worth taking. It's not the Prime Minister's reputation at stake, it's the national security. Just one quick question. You have been long-term friends with Peter Manderson. You've been accused, and I do it quite often on social media, of basically, making excuses for him and indeed for this Prime Minister. Are you still friends with Peter Manderson?
I think that Peter Manderson, knowing what we know now about the depth of his friendship with Epstein, about passing secrets or confidential information from government, and taking money, both him and his partner taking money from Epstein.
Okay, by the way, those are allegations. I need to point out
Well, they're what are contained in the Epstein files.
Yeah.
I feel on the basis of those allegations, Peter Manderson was wrong to have even sought.
Are you still friends?
Well, I haven't seen him, but
have you called him? Are you messaging with him?
I have had some messages from him. Yes.
You're still friends with the man who's been accused of these crimes again. He's denied any wrongdoing, and you carried on being mates with a man who was raping 14-year-olds.
Julia, we are journalists, and that means that by definition...
Is he a contact or a friend?
By definition, we're in contact with all sorts of people.
I didn't ask you if you were in contact with him. I asked you if you were still friends.
I don't know. I mean, I think he's behaved incredibly badly. He's done incredible damage. He's destroyed an awful lot of people's lives. Do you think
he's a bad person?
Shocking. I think on the basis of what we know, he probably is a bad person.
And you're still friends with him?
Well,
I mean, I admire the loyalty, Adam.
We have discussed this before, but the basis of friendship is not always linked to the moral character of people.
Good to know. Adam, I have to leave it there.
I would just make one final point.
No, I'm going to have to leave it there. I can't tell you, about 20 minutes over time. Adam Bolton, thank you very much. I know we'll speak again. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:50 is the time. Right, went a little bit over on that. Difficult to get calls in. I promise I will get extra calls in the next hour. By the way, Labour peer Lord Glassman is going to be in the studio in about 10 minutes' time. Right now, let's turn our attention to the, small matter of what the hell is going on in Iran. And indeed, why are so many of our SAS soldiers resigning over war crime witch hunts? Well, let's talk to Colonel Simon Diggins about both of those stories. Military and defence analyst, of course. A very good morning to you, Simon.
Julia, very good morning to you as well.
Thank you for giving us a little bit of a break from the Manderson affair. Let's talk first of all about what on earth is going on in the Iran conflict. We've got these talks that are due to start. I think Iran has said they are going to send people. J.D. Vance will be leading the US delegation. Is there any realistic hope, given we've had that seizing of an Iranian-flagged cargo ship by the Americans the last couple of days, that we are going to see any end to this conflict anytime soon?
I think that it's the best at best 50-50. I mean, I think one of the challenges we've got is, who are we talking to when we're talking to Iran? Are we talking to the foreign ministry? Are we talking to the leader of their parliament? Are we actually talking to the IRGC? I read when they had the last set of talks in Islamabad, the Iranian delegation rather surprised the Pakistanis that over 70 members of the delegation. And effectively, the real negotiation, I think, was happening inside the Iranian regime and not necessarily between the Iranian regime and the United States. And I think that's the challenge that the US has got.
That's the thing. We really don't know who's in charge. The late Ayatollah's son, apparently very badly injured, probably in a coma, has not been seen in it's over a month now, a month or two now, apparently in charge, but clearly not. And that's the thing. We don't know who we're negotiating with, so we can't necessarily see what's happening. The reality is, though, if the point of this war, as Donald Trump said to us, was to stop Iran becoming a nuclear power, and they don't want to give up their enriched uranium. And certainly, I think there's a debate whether they could stop enriching for 5 years, 20 years. A, we know they'll lie. B, we're just going to be doing the same thing again in the future. This would be an abject fail, would it not, by the Americans, if the one expressed key aim of this conflict was to stop the Iranians from being able to create a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, no, and it's exactly the point that's also been made to the Americans by the Gulf allies. And I think we should listen to those Gulf allies of ours. They have been very clear that if we just leave effectively Iran wounded, but able to recuperate, that all the things you just outlined, the development of nuclear weapons, the refurbishment, reorganization of their ballistic missile forces, and probably the development again of their proxy forces will continue. I mean, what they're looking for is a decisive solution. And that, I think, is the challenge for President Trump and for the Americans and the Israelis. Yeah. Can they actually deliver on that, given what we now understand about what's happened in Iran, the way in which they have disaggregated their leadership, so it's now broken down to the so-called mosaic leadership across all the different provinces, 31 provinces. Very difficult to then, therefore, get a deal from the Iranians and actually make it stick.
That said, I've got rather little sympathy for those autocratic, totalitarian regimes running the Arab Gulf states. There's only one democracy in the Middle East, and that is Israel. And those countries having just happily sat by, Qatar actually basically offering a safe place to live, and the billionaires who are in charge of Hamas while they slaughtered Israelis and allowed Iran to happily supply weaponry to Hezbollah, the largest militia force in the world, to attack attack Iran from Lebanon. I mean, they could have acted sooner, could they not? It's a bit much for them to suddenly go, oh, no, look, now Iran's a problem. Oh, do you think...
I'm going to disagree with you, actually, because I think you've got to look at the geography. Look at the physical location of those. I mean, they've had to basically sit alongside a sleeping dragon. They hate it. They absolutely hate it. But at the same time, they've also in Qatar had Al Udeid Air Base. In Bahrain, they have the US, indeed, a Royal Navy base from there. And Oman are our great friends. So they sit on this kind of on this volcano the whole time. And have they been consistent? No, they haven't. But I think they've tried to do their very best. But they're now really clear, and I think that's the point we need to build on.
They get it now. Look, we'll see where that goes. There's so much speculation in the media on this one. We simply don't know. I mean, we just see a different statement from the American president every other day on this. Let's talk about something that we do suspect is true, though. The Special Air Force SAS soldiers are resigning en masse in significant numbers over fears they're going to be subjected to witch hunts by human rights lawyers. Sources are claiming that soldiers from 22 SAS, that's the most elite fighting force in the military, have applied for premature voluntary release. Now, this, of course, follows these cases where we've seen police officers, Met police and obviously armed officers, basically downing their weapons, refusing to be armed because they keep getting prosecuted for murder, investigated for long periods of time after carrying out their duties to keep us and themselves safe. But this is even worse with the SAS because this is often ongoing for decades, isn't it?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And the thing about this is the process is the punishment. So the point of persecuting the SAS soldiers and indeed the veterans in Northern Ireland and our friends in the Met Police is all about the process. It puts their morale under pressure. Whether the result in the end, and mostly in the end, the result is they're found not guilty, the cases are cleared, etc., etc. But if you've been suspended for duty, if you feel you can't go out, and of course it's not just about places like Northern Ireland. Some of the most recent SAS soldiers, they're worried about things that may or may not have happened in Iraq and Afghanistan, in Syria, and all sorts of places like that. The government has not created the kind of conditions, the morale conditions, whereby people can take really high risks on behalf, as you're rightly saying, of all of us. and feel that they've got their country's back behind them. It's a shameful, disgraceful place to be in.
Yeah, I mean, we are not talking about people who are being accused of, horrific war crimes, that we would, absolutely, and indeed every military man and woman would want people prosecuted for. We are talking about people going about their duty, following orders to actually try and keep themselves and others, often civilians, safe, and then facing prosecution afterwards. It's an absolutely extraordinary state of affairs. And again, the people who like the process, the armchair generals, the human rights lawyers, don't actually understand what it's really like. Colonel Simon Dickens, thank you so much for joining us, military and defence analyst. Thank you for that. We're going to take another quick break. Back with you in just a moment. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. As you've probably gathered if you know the show well, we're a little bit over time. Lots of top guests over the show. Obviously, you're talking more about what's going on with Keir Starmer and Olly Robbins. More of that coming up. What do you make of it all? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Up next, we're going to get the latest headlines. Then we're going to be talking to Labour peer Lord Glassman. How does he think the Prime Minister has survived evidence yesterday and today? Or does he think he is walking wounded? This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. And I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Don't forget, if you missed anything from the show, frankly, why would you? You can go to my YouTube page, hit subscribe, never have to miss a thing. Easy to find, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Coming up in this hour, we're discussing more about what Keir Starmer had to say to the House of Commons yesterday. MPs laughing and jeering at him openly. 2 MPs openly calling him a liar. And now today, Sir Olly Robbins, the man he sacked and blamed for the whole Lord Manderson vetting affair, basically saying, I followed the process, Prime Minister, rather than you. I did the right thing. So we're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about Ed Miliband apparently doubling down, oh great, on his green energy drive, despite not just fears, the reality that it will be pushing up prices for us when it comes to heating our homes and running factories, running a business and indeed driving a car. And we're also going to be talking about a supermarket manager who worked at Morrison's for 29 years, who was sacked after tackling a shoplifter who says he's now barely surviving. We had the one at Waitrose who got offered a job at Iceland, didn't we? But apparently this seems to be happening rather too often. Anyway, lots and lots to talk about. We've been talking with Benedict Spence. He's going to be back in the studio in just a few moments. But delighted to say joining me right now is Lord Glassman. Maurice Glassman is a Labour peer and founder of Blue Labour. A very good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon to you.
I've got a few clips I want to play you.
Oh.
Oh, you lucky thing. We'll come back to what the Prime Minister had to say yesterday, but I want to play you a clip of Sir Olly Robbins, the sacked yesterday on his birthday, rather cruelly, chief civil servant at the Foreign Office, and this is what he had to say about the vetting of Peter Manderson. Have a watch and a listen.
A position taken from the Cabinet Office was that there was no need to vet Mandelson. He was a member of the House of Lords. He was a Privy Councillor. The risks that attending his appointment were well known and had been made clear to the Prime Minister before appointment. Now, in the end, the FCDO insisted and put its foot down. I understand my predecessor had to be very firm in person. But that was a live debate at the point of announcement, and I think it's important to make that clear to the committee.
So basically, there he was, basically saying, the Cabinet Office basically reports to the Prime Minister, didn't really think there was any need to vet Peter Manderson. He also said, when it came to UK's security vetting, what they had to say to him about it being, well, a borderline matter whether or not Manderson should receive approval.
I was briefed that UKSV considered Mandelson a borderline case, and that they were leaning towards recommending that clearance be denied, but that the Foreign Office's Security Department assessed that the risks identified as of highest concern by UKSV could be managed and or mitigated. I was also told that the risks did not relate to Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and that I was told that UKSV acknowledged, I don't know in what way, but acknowledged that the Foreign Office might wish to grant clearance with appropriate risk management.
Appropriate risk management. Now, look, we're all a little bit unclear here, Lord Glassman. The summary of what Sir Olly Robbins has had to say in the wake of what the Prime Minister said in the Commons, and we'll talk about that in a moment, is basically that, look, this man was already appointed to the job. I came in 2 weeks late, 2 weeks into this whole process had started. He was going to be appointed to the job. He'd already basically been publicly announced. The King had given approval. They got approval from Washington for him to be the person, the credentials to be sent. Donald Trump had approved it. He'd already had access to the building. He was having access to some higher classification security. He even had access to the IT system. Basically, the strong message, quite a lot of pressure coming from number 10 of the Cabinet Office was, get the vetting done. We don't even think it needs to be done. Get the vetting done. A question of when, not what was actually said, or whether or not he would pass the vetting. And so when they came through this ruling, he says, from the UK Security Vetting Service that, well, he was a borderline case, without telling him exactly what the issues were, he decided that he would not overrule that. He, within his powers as the chief at the Foreign Office, chose to approve the vetting on the basis that no one appeared, I'm paraphrasing, but I think it's a fair summary, no one appeared to really care whether or not he was vetted or whether he passed his vetting anyway, and there would be some sort of mitigating factors to try and deal with any issues that had been raised. Is that a fair summary? And if it is, why the hell didn't number 10, why the hell didn't the Prime Minister and his staff care whether this man was vetted for the most senior diplomatic role in our country?
Well, it's clear that it was an absolutely political appointment. Peter Manderson, I was told, had done the Good Friday negotiations. He was a cabinet minister then. He was also responsible for the Lisbon Treaty, that he was a skilled negotiator. They absolutely... The words that were said to me were sending a snake into a snake pit. You know, they thought he was the master negotiator. And it's clear that this was a very, very bad political judgment. I mean, when I was at the inauguration, Julia, I can't tell you...
You interestingly were invited to Donald Trump's inauguration.
I was indeed there, and I can't tell you the number of people who walked up to me with photographs on their phone of Mandelson with Epstein in his dressing gown, blowing the candles out of the birth. They showed me a photo of him going underwear shopping. I mean, what kind of relationship is this? But obviously everybody knew, as Leonard Cohen said, everybody knows. He was at Global Counsel. He led Global Counsel.
That was his lobbying firm.
Consultancy, of course.
Oh, same difference.
Yes, exactly the same difference. They were knee-deep in Russian and Chinese oligarchs. Everybody knew, everybody knows. So all this procedural stuff is completely beside the point. A very bad political decision was made, and they can't own it. They can't own it.
Do you think, we spoke to Adam Bolton earlier, who's a long time, big beast in terms of British political reporting.
Well,
but
he
also
was knee-deep in Mandelson work.
And an old friend of Peter Manderson. He didn't deny that they're still friends. And his wife, Angie, worked for Tony Blair. And again, forever. Okay, so there's a lot. I mean, again, the links between the British media and the political world
particularly Murdoch,
very
Of
close.
course.
I'm just saying the links are very, very close. But here's the thing. But very personal friendships.
Deep friendships.
But I've almost lost my track here. If as Adam Bolton says, he had basically said, look, I made a mistake. The Prime Minister said early on, as soon as all the Epstein files came out and these revelations which sparked these criminal investigations into Peter Manderson about leaking stuff when he was a minister under Gordon Brown. If he'd said, look, I made a mistake, it's entirely my fault, I shouldn't have done it, and I hold my hands up. If he had done that from word go, do you think this would all be over and he would be
completely
out of it scot-free?
Completely. Look, we all make mistakes. This is just a really bad political mistake. I mean,
no, but the political mistake of appointing him, but the political mistake in terms of how he handled it once everything emerged.
Well, absolutely. It should never have been made in the first place. But having made it, given all the absolutely own it. There's nothing else you can do, and you've got to hold your hands up and say, it's on me, and this would have disappeared entirely from
I don't think it would have disappeared entirely. I think once we had the subsequent accusations and the criminal investigation into Manderson, a lot more questions would have been asked then about was there any vetting or not. But the Prime Minister repeatedly said when he sacked Lord Manderson as our ambassador to the US, he said that, if he had known then known then what he knew now, he wouldn't have appointed him. But the point is, what has been emerging ever since then is virtually everything that we found out, other than what was in the Epstein files, was already known at the time when he appointed him.
Julia, everybody knew. This is what I'm saying. The photos with Epstein were in the public
realm. So has he lied to Parliament?
That all hinges on whether he did actually read the security vetting, but that's not the point I'm making. He's turning this into a procedural legal matter. It's not. It's a political judgment matter. That's the point.
It's a national security matter.
Quite.
Let me play a little clip of the Prime Minister yesterday when he basically forced pretty much everybody to burst out laughing at him in the chamber. Have a watch and a listen of this.
I know many members across the House will find these facts to be incredible. To that, I can only say they are right. It beggars belief.
It beggars belief, and it really does beg belief. There was also, again, a big reaction to what Diane Abbott, the mother of the House, the longest-serving female MP, a Labour MP, lots of ex-Labour and Labour MPs put in the boot in yesterday. And this was the question that she asked, which, interestingly, Kemi Badenoch didn't ask, fairly forensic questioning, but she didn't ask this really, really, really simple, specific question.
Peter Manderson has a history, and what this House wants to know is why, knowing Peter Manderson's history, going back now 30 years, and given what has been known, it's one thing to say, as he insists on saying, nobody told me. Nobody told me anything. Nobody told me. The question is, why didn't the Prime Minister ask?
Now, this is the thing, isn't it, Lord Glassman? Why didn't the Prime Minister ask? The argument is that, look, he didn't ask because he didn't want to know the answer. Or that he did ask and he's lying. But either way, neither is good enough, is it?
No, I mean, this is, you know, when... OK, I'll paraphrase for the kindness of your viewers. When you muck up, you've got to own it. This is the golden rule of life.
But sometimes when you muck up, you have to own it by resigning from your job because your judgment is so poor. We had Lee Anderson for Reform Party, and we had your party, Zura Sultana, former Labour MP, both openly defying the Common Speaker, who categorically told them, procedure in the House, you're not allowed to call someone a liar to their face. Both saying blatantly he is a liar. We've got the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch. She has issued a statement again today, basically saying Keir Starmer has misled the House. The evidence from Olly Robbins is devastating to Keir Starmer. Is he a dead man walking?
It really looks that way to me, because essentially this is overwhelming government function. I mean, there's a war in Iran that I would like to talk to you about, which is absolutely crucial to our national interest, where we're completely inactive. There's also the ongoing war in Ukraine, which is moving at pace. It looks like the relationship with the United States is in a very precarious position. That's just on the Foreign Office side, setting aside the abandonment of welfare reform that going on, how the state...
we're facing a massive economic financial crisis.
And the state of our armed forces and the centre of government is completely paralysed by this story.
Is that a fault? Some people say, look, the media, we're the ones who keep talking about this. We should be talking about more important things. But the reality is, we can't not talk about this when it comes down to this. We're talking about the judgment of the Prime Minister, whether or not the Prime Minister has lied to Parliament, i.e. lying to us. He hasn't admitted he'd lied to Parliament. Even though a briefing from Number 10 said that he would do that yesterday, or misled the House, sorry, and he certainly said he hasn't misled the House knowingly, which would be an instantly resigning matter. But at the end of the day, this is a national security issue. We've got a man who's in charge of this government and a bunch of his staff. I mean, we've had four figures, either in Number 10 or the Foreign Office, who've now lost their jobs over this.
Including Morgan McSweeney,
his chief of staff.
A very, very powerful force.
I'll come to that in a moment. But we've got, everyone else has gone apart from the Prime Minister, and Peter Manderson. And yet he's the one who had this catastrophic error of judgment that we don't know may have actually put our national security at risk. This is a legitimate story for us to be talking about, is it not?
I don't think it can be disputed that this is a legitimate story. This is certainly so. And what it reveals is an inability to own your own decisions. So it's this legal fallback into procedural matters.
Which doesn't work.
It really never works. It doesn't work in life, and it doesn't work in politics.
OK, well, let me ask you about one other thing that came up in some of these later exchanges at that committee this morning with Sir Olly Robbins. He was asked by the Lib Dem MP Richard Ford about a report that was carried out, a report by Sam Coates of Sky News, basically reporting that the Prime Minister's then Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, had called the former Foreign Office boss, the man who had the job before Sir Olly Robbins, Sir Philip Barton, to tell him basically to, I won't use the language, to approve Peter Manderson's appointment. Now, I'm going to play you that little exchange. We had to bleep out the offending word, but suffice to say it does begin with an F. But here is the exchange between the Lib Dem MP Richard Ford, also the Labour chair of that committee, who holds no candle for Keir Starmer after he didn't give her a job in the cabinet, Emily Thornberry, about this, and Sir Olly Robbins' response. Have a watch and a listen here.
Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff, rang Sir Philip and said, in terms stronger than those that I can use before the watershed.
I think you should.
Well, I'll just say that it was just to prove it with terms stronger than that.
Just prove it.
Does it accord with your impression when you took over from Sir Philip?
Certainly, Philip's handover to me has contributed to my strong sense that there was an atmosphere of pressure and a certain dismissiveness about this DV process, which I hope I've tried already to be honest with the committee about. I don't remember Philip using those words. Also, I'm proud to say Philip's probably not the sort of person who'd report them verbatim.
Well, that's the claim, that the F word was used basically by the Prime Minister's then Chief of Staff, who, of course, you know, no longer has his phone because it was so conveniently stolen, but basically telling them to just effing approve it. This was the thing. They just wanted Manderson in the job. Here's the bit I don't get, Maurice Glassman. What was it? What was it that they thought that Manderson could bring to this job that made this all worth it?
I'll tell you exactly what it was. Let's just take a moment, if you give me 45 seconds, let's say. Is that Peter Manderson probably the most important person in politics in the last 40 years? He created New Labour. He was the intellectual force behind it. He was the organisational force, and he enforced it. He chose Tony Blair. He chose Gordon Brown to lead it. Everybody of the last 40 years, Cameron and Osborne, were enthralled to Peter Manderson. I believe Peter was urinating against George Osborne's house only recently. They all agreed with globalisation, with the end of industry, Europe, with the EU completely. Peter Manderson is probably, along with Nigel Farage, the most important political figure of the last 40 years. And they were all enthralled to his negotiating. No one can call him lazy. He did the Lisbon Treaty, he did the Good Friday Agreement. He was the chief negotiator. And the idea was, you put the snake into the snake pit, and that's a perfect appointment. So what I'm saying is, this is the most important figure. So you ask me, why him? And I'm telling you,
it wasn't just a bit of gold dust. They really genuinely believed that he was going to be a rainmaker, a game changer.
Yeah, and he is the most significant figure in our politics because he actually delivered the Labour movement to global capital.
Yeah,
well, that's what he did.
The current situation is we've got a Prime Minister who's on the back foot. We've got a very angry civil servant we're probably going to have to pay good few $100,000 to as a payoff in terms of his sacking. I'm pretty sure he's banged to rights in terms of he hasn't actually done anything in the wrong to justify him being sacked. He'll have a huge claim that will no doubt be settled to avoid it going to tribunal. We've got this ongoing issue. We've got ongoing investigations. We've got a criminal investigation into Peter Manderson as well. He's denied any wrongdoing. I have to keep saying that because it's important we don't forget that. But we've got a Prime Minister who is effectively a dead man walking. How long has he got?
You know, the dilemma facing my party, the Labour Party, is that this government has no ideological direction. I mean, they just get blown from pillar to post. There's no strategic... With New Labour, which was Manderson's genius, it was all, do you remember, modernisation? Everything was going to be modernised. People go on the internet, forget about industry, financial services was the way. That was everything, and public sector management. But this government is in a new era, and it looks like it's ideologically stranded. So this is the problem.
How long has he got? Because we've got the local elections coming up in just a few weeks, on the 7th of May, plus the Welsh elections and the Scottish elections as well. Looks like Labour are going to have an absolutely horrific night. Tories a pretty bad night as well, but Labour, ones in power, are going to be facing that. A lot of talk about there being a leadership election. It's already very obvious. You see, Ed Miliband peeling himself away, saying, well, I had nothing to do with Peter Manderson. I'd expressed my concerns to the then Foreign Secretary David Lammy, who'd agreed with me. Everyone is basically saying, oh, nothing to do with me, Gov. They're all going to gradually peel themselves away. Very noticeable. We didn't get a big cheer for the Prime Minister at the beginning of his statement in the House of Commons yesterday. They clearly aren't convinced. When or if are they going to try and oust him?
Well, this is it. In politics, just to share with your listeners, there's a golden rule. The price of a successful action is a constructive alternative.
That's the issue.
That's the issue.
Who would be your choice? Because the big runners and riders, Andy Burnham, not yet an MP. He needs to have a by-election and win it. Angela Rayner, still not cleared from her battles with HMRC over her unpaid stamp duty for her second home. She's got a fine to pay. She's refusing to pay. She wants to clear her name. I doubt she will, to be honest with you. But that could be months and months and months. We've got Wes Streeting. Again, popular, I think, in the media class, perhaps not so, and perhaps with the public, not so with the Labour, with the Labour Party members, far more to the left. Ed Miliband, by all accounts, by far and away the most popular figure who's sitting in the cabinet right now. Is it the case that many people in Labour who think that Keir Starmer's dead man walking, they don't want him anymore, they think he's useless, he's damaged goods, but the alternative, if it's Ed Miliband, is so much worse, they're not willing to take the risk?
Yeah, that's it. So just to let you know, it's always been the case, and I've said it many, many times, that I absolutely respect Shabana Mahmood. I think she's the one member of the cabinet who shines. She's honest, she's diligent, she's got a clear sense of direction. She is not
At all in line with the vast majority of Labour Party activists and members, though, is she?
And here lies the great dilemma. But you asked me who I thought.
You think Shabana Mahmood?
I'm telling you
but
that.
She's not going to win. And by the way, she's not a straight white man, so legally I'm sure she's not allowed to win the Labour Party leadership. You guys don't do that, do you?
Well, it's like an ethnic minority woman, I think.
I mean, I don't think it's ever happened before. Do you think that would ever happen? I mean, look,
I'm just telling you that
Labour MPs are appalled, let alone Labour Party members, by her very sensible, minimal efforts to try and stem immigration.
Well, I think she's actually moving in completely the right direction. I do absolutely.
But Labour Party members don't think she is.
Yeah, so the Labour Party members have got to look at what's going on when it comes to the local elections and going on. We have lost the trust of working class. That's just the reality.
Yeah.
Without Labour, without the working class, it's just a Liberal Party in disguise, just a bunch of Whigs running around. We've got to find our identity, that we are in favour of industry, we are in favour of order, of stability, of control of the borders. We believe in contribution, people putting in. I'm completely faithful to Ernest Bevin, Clement Attlee. That's the party I'm part of.
You sound more like a Reform Party member right now, based on current policy.
Well, I don't think they're serious about the industrial strategy. That's your one area, your one bone in contention. Also, I think that Farage is a bit of a Putin appeaser, to be honest. I'm very strong for Ukraine, as I am very supportive, very, very supportive of the Iranian people in their desire to get rid of this disgusting Islamic regime in Tehran. I mean, these are the things that I really care about.
Okay, let me ask you just finally, what do you think is going to happen over the next few weeks, particularly in relation to Keir Starmer's future, if you had to put your house on it?
Limping on.
Right, there you are. That's what he has to say. Lord Glassman, Labour peer, founder of Blue Labour. Thank you very much. 12:25 is the time. We'll get your thoughts up next. So give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Daniel is on the line in Epsom. Daniel, what do you make of, well, basically what Keir Starmer had to say yesterday, what Olly Robbins, the sacked Foreign Office chief, had to say today?
I think it's astonishing to think that he didn't know. I just think it's... I think he's got himself an alibi and he's going with it. He's going to try and last as long as he can. He knows he's probably going to get kicked out in May. I mean,
do you think? I don't think he even knows that. I think his hubris is such that he thinks he can weather the storm.
Yeah, I just think he's so out of touch with the British majority out there. I think he should actually be kicked out for trying to, in a clandestine, underhanded way, trying to get us to rejoin the EU.
Yes,
I think he should get kicked out because there are still thousands of men from the third world invading our country every day, and he said he would smash the gangs and he hasn't done anything. I think he should be kicked out because I can tell from my business the economy's on the wane. There's less money in people's pockets. I see it. And the economy's on the wane. Law and order's probably at an all-time low. I mean, you know, there are any number of reasons to kick him out. I mean, the decline and degradation in Britain, I mean, it's unbelievable.
I don't think, to be fair to him, not often I say that. I don't think, to be fair to him, it's all his fault. It's been ongoing for a long time, and not just under the Tories as well. But my God, he's done absolutely nothing to make anything better.
No, he hasn't done anything. If anything, he's exacerbated all of the problems that we already had.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember Rishi Sunak. I'm not a big fan of Rishi Sunak, but he did say, if you vote in Labour, you'll be paying more tax, things won't get any better. And guess what? That's exactly what's happened. Yeah. And I think, Julia, it's just insane. Like, he's getting involved in the case locally in Epsom, 9 days since that tragic crime.
Well, again, alleged crime. Again, I did say on the day after we were first talking about that story about alleged gang rape, we don't know. We don't know. The police said they haven't found any evidence. And if there's no evidence of anyone being dragged into a church on things, I don't know whether the crime even happened.
Well, there's a lot going on here locally. I mean, people want answers and they're not getting them.
No, absolutely.
And there's talk, Julia. There's only talk. I must say that they know exactly who they are, and they won't release when they eventually release the names of the people that did it. They'll claim that they're under 18. So they don't have to.
Well, they can't. You can claim or not claim. At the end of the day, if someone ends up in court, then these things get found out. Daniel, thank you for that. Appreciate that. Let's go to Craig, who is in Bournemouth. Hello, Craig.
Hello, Julia. How are you doing?
Very well indeed. What do you want to say?
How can he actually say, as Prime Minister of this country, after what he said and what Olly Robbins has come out and disclosed, he's thrown everybody else under the bus to just save his skin? I agree with your last caller. The crime rates in this country have gone absolutely off the scale. It's a complete and utter mess. And I do agree with you. Under the Tories, to be honest, I think why Labour got in was because everybody was a little bit fed up with the Tories.
Oh, undoubtedly.
But at the same time, Keir Starmer hasn't made anything better. He's frozen the pensioners.
Yep.
He's penalised the people that have effectively been feeding us, the farmers.
Yep.
It is a complete and utter mess. Of course, it's been done to death, with regards to the migrant crisis and what's happening. And what it's doing is it's actually driving out the people that are going to contribute to this country.
Oh, that is the big worry, isn't it? But that said, a lot of people say, if it's not Keir Starmer, it's going to be someone else. It's still going to be, without an election, and there's no reason for any of these Labour MPs to vote for an election, you're still looking at a Labour Prime Minister. Are the alternatives on offer? Angela Rayner, Ed Miliband, realistically, are they any better?
No. Not a single one of them is better.
That's why he's still in the job. That's why. Craig, thank you for your call. Appreciate that. Look, you knew it had to happen on a big day like today. Georgina in London is on the line. Georgina, good afternoon to you, my darling. And what would you like to say about where we are with Keir Starmer and Peter Manderson's appointment?
Well, being laughed at when you're fighting for your political life, Julia, is not a strong position for any Prime Minister to be in,
Absolutely.
as Keir Starmer now knows. But fighting for your political life and being friendless takes a humiliation to a whole new level. And Keir Starmer's resignation, I think, is now imminent. I mean, to every action, there's a reaction. And in my humble opinion, Keir Starmer signed his own death warrant with the statements to the House yesterday. Nobody in the House believed a word he said. He was laughed at, and it was utterly embarrassing to witness. This is our Prime Minister, Julia. It's someone whom we should be able to respect and should have the respect of his peers, and he hasn't. Olly Robbins' evidence that he gave this morning hasn't helped Keir Starmer's cause in the slightest. You rush things through to hide the detail, as that's where the devil lies, Julia.
Yeah. But they didn't care. They didn't care about the vetting. They didn't care.
Exactly. But, you know, it was conveniently ignored so as to give the excuse of plausible deniability. But after saying that, it's nigh on impossible to get behind the lies and deception in this matter. As all this party does when, you know, put in difficult circumstances is double down, close ranks and cover each other's backs. I don't ever think we'll get to the full story regarding Peter Mandelson. No. But what I do know is that, you know, those who have been involved are as crooked as a dog's hind leg. And they now know that this deception is in the public domain. We can't continue forward with a government who will willfully put our national security at risk.
Yeah. I think that's where it comes down to. We have to keep forgetting it. We've got to talk about it's a judgment. It's not about Peter Mandelson as such. It's about our national security. Georgina, we'll leave it there. Always great to hear from you. Thank you very much indeed. Benedict Spence is still with us now, Conservative commentator back in the studio. I mean, it's interesting. Look, you look at all the calls on the board. I mean, everyone, you know, to a man and woman is saying, look, no one believes it. It's really obvious in the House of Commons. No one believes the Prime Minister. I don't think anyone in his own cabinet believes the Prime Minister. We've currently got the now Foreign Secretary, former Home Secretary Yvette Cooper on her feet in response to a debate again on this issue called by the Conservatives. And you know, all these people, I mean, behind the scenes, they're all saying very different things to what they're saying on, you know, publicly. No one wants to be associated with the Prime Minister now. He is a dead man walking. Yes. And we're basically stuck with him because we need 80 Labour MPs. OK, there's 400 of them. There's quite a lot. But they've got to stand up and basically say, no, I have no confidence in this Prime Minister. I want to support this one candidate. Now, you know, realistically, is that going to happen anytime soon after the local elections?
Well, certainly he's not going to resign of his own volition. That's not going to happen. He's spent far too long trying to get to where he is, and he still feels, I think, that he has some road left to go. The question then is, as you say, how many of those front benchers can actually get enough support and get Labour MPs to break ranks? It's not really in that party's DNA to get rid of leaders in the same way as it is for the Conservative Party. And it's a really difficult one because also on the backbenchers, you've got that conversation, which is, OK, if we're getting rid of Keir Starmer because he's damaging us electorally, who do you actually parachute in who would improve our chances? Because you can do what the party would like to do, which is an Ed Miliband, but they must know on some level, OK, we'd feel really good about that, but actually, is the country going to thank us for that?
But also,
almost certainly
he's
not.
Run as leader before, and he's more extreme now than he was then. I mean,
So who do you find?
He's had a woken green awakening.
Yes. But who do you find, therefore, who actually ticks enough boxes that he's acceptable to the left of the party, to all the backbenchers, and to the country? I'm really struggling to think who that person is. I think you probably are as well. And this is the question, and that's why he will not resign, because he understands until they find such a person, he probably reckons, because he is slightly out of touch with reality, he's got a chance of hanging on. Yeah, and again, you know, Prime Minister's got away with more, but again, he probably, with his hubris, his sense of, one of the things about Keir Starmer is when he gets questioned, how tetchy he gets, how outrageous, how shocked he was when he was laughed at in the chamber. That clip we played a few times on the show today when he was saying, it's incredible that I wasn't told. And everyone just burst out laughing, even on the Labour benches, because it's incredible, as it's literally not credible. It is unbelievable. It's preposterous, as Kemi Bednar said. I mean, if you're being openly laughed at, forget being called a liar, forget being told you're incompetent, forget about your judgment. If you're being openly laughed at, even by your own backbenchers, when you were on the ropes like that,
you're a goner. End of. 12:36 is the time. One person who's definitely not a goner right now is Ed Miliband, the Net Zero or Energy Security Secretary. You can't be both. He is apparently going to double down, in his own words, on his green energy drive, because apparently that's what's going to get us out of the hot water of our energy prices going up as a result of the Iran conflict. He couldn't be more wrong. Or could he? Well, we're going to be talking to Donica McCarthy, who's going to be just as wrong as Ed Miliband, up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Welcome back. This is Home of Common Sense for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, Benedict Spencer with us as well. Let's talk about Ed Miliband. No, not him basically saying, well, I would have nothing to do with Peter Manderson, or I didn't have anything to do with him when I was Labour leader. Oh, by the way, lost an election. Tories getting a majority in 2015 when he was leader, despite his brilliant idea of his Ed Stone. But Ed Miliband was on telly today doing the rounds, sort of ish, not really defending the Prime Minister, but also crucially announcing that he is vowing to double down on his green energy drive despite fears about prices for energy. He's set to use the Iran war to justify revving up rather than walking away from his net zero agenda after we've seen prices go spiralling as a result of the Middle East and that blockade of oil and gas tankers. The Energy Secretary is announcing plans alongside the Chancellor today to cut the link between electricity and gas prices, and that means that the final price of electricity you use is not set by the highest price of gas at that time, which I think has always been utterly insane. He's also said they're doubling down on basically having more power generators for electricity, nuclear power, and of course more wind and solar. Well, let's talk about this with Donica McCarthy, who's the director of the Climate Media Coalition and joins us once again. Good afternoon to you, Donica.
Good afternoon, Julia. How are you?
I can't imagine anybody genuinely thinking it's a good idea, apart from the fact I know I've got someone at the other end of the line right now, and Ed Miliband as well, who would think that after seeing what's happening in the Iran conflict, after seeing what happened in the Ukraine war, and seeing when there is a tightening up of oil supplies and liquefied natural gas supplies, that the answer is to actually double down on net zero, to make us more reliant on solar and wind and nuclear power plants, none of which, by the way, are going to come online until 2030 at the earliest, that have been planned by this government, and probably much later, because most things in this country are years after they are planned. When actually the solution is we need to drill more in the North Sea and get more of the oil and gas, and we need to frack underneath our land, because we could become more of an energy producer and thereby safeguard a lot of our energy supplies. Why do you think Ed Miliband is right to double down on net zero?
I really don't understand you, Julia. After all these years, we have gone through fossil fuel prices after fossil fuel crisis, and we are facing another one. And you're saying the answer is to double down on our fossil fuel addiction. I don't understand the logic of that.
That's because you don't like facts.
When somebody is causing you a crisis, you deal with a crisis. So we need to get off our addiction to oil. Now, the exciting thing...
Well, no,
the
wait a
exciting
second.
thing this week is that for the first time ever, the price of EV cars, the average new EV car in the UK, is cheaper than a new fossil fuel car. Secondly, the price of running an EV car is a fraction of running a petrol car. And parallel to that, renewable energy has been cheaper than fossil energy since 2017. I'm really delighted that we're actually starting today's conversation on something the two of us agree with.
What?
Our electricity prices in the UK have been set since 2017 by the most expensive energy, which is fossil gas. What Miliband is finally doing today, which people like, maybe you and I have been calling this for years, is we need to separate that.
Well, it was always utterly insane. And we were constantly told, well, you know, if we don't have enough power from solar or from wind or from nuclear, we have to set the price from the last bit of gas that is used, whether it's 5% or 50% on it's a pretty miserable day today, not much sun, not much wind, that we will rely on the gas. And then we're paying the extraordinarily high gas prices. That was always madness, and for some reason was not changed. But you just said we need to get off our addiction to oil. What decade, out of interest, do you think we are not going to be reliant for the vast majority of our energy needs on fossil fuels?
Well, it depends how fast we make the transition.
What decade do you think it's feasible for us to get off? If we went like gunboats, we went like it. What decade do you think we could do that?
By early 2030s, for like 5 to 6 years.
Sorry.
Wait, let me finish.
By the early 2030s?
Yeah, within around 6 years, the national grid.
That wasn't what I asked you.
No.
That's electricity. We're talking about energy.
First of all, the national grid will be free of fossil fuels largely by the early 2030s, 5 or 6 years' time. We will stop selling fossil fuel cars in around 5 years' time. We should be doing that now. It depends how fast we do to transition. In other countries like Norway, they're at 98%. We need to move away from
Donica, I wasn't asking you about our electricity supply. I was asking you
now talking about cars.
Decade. Yes, you're fine. And by the way, the reason why EVs are cheaper now is because they're all subsidised by China, who make them in factories that are powered by coal. So let's stop the absolute nonsense there. What decade do you think we can get ourselves off? Listen to the question again. Answer the question.
You talked about coal in China, so let me answer that.
What decade can we get off?
China.
Answer the question I've already asked you. What decade can we get off our addiction to oil? You're talking about electricity. We're not even going to get off it for electricity. We rely on oil and gas for the vast majority of our energy needs in this country. 80% at times. What decade are we getting off it?
As fast as people like
give me a decade.
I can't give you an answer.
If you're saying we shouldn't be drilling in the oil, we shouldn't be drilling in the North Sea for new oil licenses for gas and oil. If we shouldn't be relying on anything other than renewables. When are we doing that by?
So let me speak.
But you need to answer the questions I asked you.
90% of this conversation is you.
Because you're not answering the questions I'm asking you. You're saying things that are abject nonsense,
you want me to come
and you won't justify them.
Look, Julia, really, if I want to come on the show, it's important to allow some chance to speak.
But you have to. But you can't just talk about anything you want to talk about. You have to answer the questions I've asked you.
You asked me a question. How fast?
Answer the question.
Well,
what decade?
It will probably take a number of decades.
How many?
20 years we could do it. We could do it in 10 years if people like you allowed us to do it, not constantly lie.
You think that within a decade we could have no reliance on fossil fuels? There is nobody at all in the energy business, even in solar energy, who thinks that's possible.
The only area we won't be off fossil fuels, if we do it properly, within 15 to 20 years, is flying. That is the area it is very difficult to get us off. However, heating, transport and electricity are easily done, and we've almost all done
factories making stuff, steel, concrete.
60% of factory energy at this moment in the UK is supplied by green energy. You just told an untruth to your viewers, Julia. You said there's very little wind and solar today. At this moment,
I can't see any wind out.
Check the grid. At this moment, 61% of our grid is coming from cheaper green energy.
Brilliant. That's wonderful.
One thing that
and then when the sun stops and the wind stops blowing, what do we do then?
Batteries.
What do we do? We have batteries. How long do the batteries last? What's our battery storage?
8% of the energy in California, one of the largest economies in the world, is already coming from batteries.
It's sunny in California, I hate to tell you.
Are you going to allow me to speak?
Come on.
8% of the energy in California now comes from battery storage, storing the solar energy during the day for use at night time. What we need to do is stop our addiction to oil. I mean, we have the cleaner cities, we have quieter cities. The advantages are amazing. I want for everybody in this country, Julia, what I have.
Well, that'd be wonderful. I know you've got, but 8% isn't 100%, is it? And what we'd really like is to be able to put our washing machines on and have our cars work and have factories be able to produce stuff without paying 4 times the energy prices of other countries in the Western world.
And let me pick up that point. Yeah. Let me pick up that point about energy pricing. You're right. UK has more expensive electricity than any other country in Europe at consumer price. Our wholesale price, we are cheaper than 12 other countries in Europe, cheaper because of our green energy. However, on top of our electricity plant, there are around 8 Tory Brown levies. Khatuna said today that it didn't matter cutting the price because most of the cost for electricity is levies. What are those levies?
Okay, look, I'm sorry, Donica, we can't go into every single one. But by the way,
just let me tell one. Let me tell
one.
By
the way, Labour have been in power for 2 years, best part.
Let me tell one Brown levy that is in place. It's the £600 cost of the privatisation of the energy grid. It's run by a monopoly called the National Grid, owned by the Gulf and the American billionaires, and they charge us £600 on our bills every year. That dwarfs anything that the green energy cost.
Okay, right. Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Donica, I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave it there. But genuinely, I'm afraid I'm always going to keep coming back at you when you say things that are categorically impossible or untrue, which you frequently do, which is one of my issues, which is why I end up asking you the same question 15 times. But if we could actually stick to facts, we'd have a more sensible debate. Donica McCarthy, Director of the Climate Media Coalition. Benedict Spence, I'm very fond of Donica. I've known him many years, been on the show many times, but I find myself getting so irritated, just so mind-blowingly irritated when people say we need to get off our addiction to oil. Nobody sane. Okay, so it probably doesn't include Manderson. Sorry, I said Manderson, Ed Miliband. That thinks that we're going to get off our oil and gas any time in the next century.
I mean, the very point of us talking about needing to drill for our own fossil fuels is because we're talking about something that is controlled by other countries. And to say, oh, well, that seems like a nonsensical argument, it's not. The point is that you have security and control over it. Nobody is expecting that if we were to start drilling in the North Sea again, or fracking, that Norway would suddenly close the North Sea. That's not what's going to happen here. And this is the thing. If you want to move towards renewables or nuclear, you need to bridge in the meantime to keep prices low, to fund the infrastructure and everything else.
Their argument is basically you need to basically have the lack of gas and oil so that you're being forced to move to it. We can all be forced to move to it. We will be having blackouts on a regular basis during winter months. It's as simple as that. And I say bring them on, because the sooner we do, the sooner everyone will wake up to the madness, which is what we're in. 12:50 is the time. I'm going to take a break. They're going to talk to the wonderful Peter Blexley about latest crime stories. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Peter Bleksley is here now. He's former Metropolitan Police Detective. A very good afternoon to you, Peter.
Good afternoon.
A couple of police stories, criminal stories I want to talk to you about. First up, we had that case, didn't we, of that Waitrose a security guard who got sacked for tackling a shoplifter, just wrestling a bag of Easter eggs off him, who rather used, I think, did get offered a job from the boss of Iceland supermarkets. But we've now got a long-serving manager of a Morrison supermarket who's also now been sacked after he tackled a serial shoplifter to the ground. This is Sean Egan. He'd worked at the Aldridge branch near Walsall for 29 years, and the thief lashed out after being confronted and restrained. So he was very aggressive. He was spitting at me. As the store manager, I put myself in a position to protect my staff and customers. And he says a lot of pressure in retail to protect the product, to not lose money. He called the police, but he was later investigated by Morrison's and ultimately sacked. Now, this is absolutely extraordinary that a long-serving member of staff, a second one, should be sacked for doing the right thing. And as he says, not just trying to get the goods off a thief, stopping a crime, but also protecting other people in the store.
Yep, it's absolutely pathetic on behalf of Morrison's here. And here we have yet another major retailer with this deter, do not detain or non-intervention policies. And this is what staff are being found to be in breach of, and then they're losing their job. Every person raised properly in this country is outraged when they see theft happening in front of them. Yeah. And so many people want to do something about it. And that really is the way that this will be tackled. It would be great if the police had the attitude of these heroic shopkeepers.
Well, exactly. I mean, he says, you know, his policy is they're supposed to sort of deter and not detain. And again, that's what these sodding shoplifters know. And he tried to remove the man from the store, but he got spat at twice. He sort of said he stepped forward, he flung his arm back. He was trying to stop him from putting more stuff in his bag. And he said, I've got to stop this guy. And then he gets sacked at a hearing. And the message that is sent out is, you know, the police won't act, the staff won't act. It's a free-for-all. And it does put law-abiding customers and other staff at risk, a lot of whom, by the way, elderly, women, children, to have criminals basically running rampant in our supermarkets.
And we're all affected by it because we're all paying higher prices as a result of it. It affects every single man, woman and child who goes shopping, wheresoever that may be. Yeah. The ironic thing is that this lamentable supermarket have the audacity to use the word deter in their policy. It's because we don't have deterrence in this country that shoplifting is at epidemic levels. We need a deterrence of being detained. We need a deterrence of being charged, taking a call and being suitably punished. But we don't have that.
They're not going to be. And again, if you get given less than a year's sentence, now you won't go to prison at all. So what's the point? Many police and courts may even say. Let me ask you about another far more serious alleged crime. And this is this alleged rape over a week ago outside a church of a woman in her 20s. 4 people have been arrested. Oh, but not those who are alleged to have committed this alleged crime, but arrested at yet another process in Epsom. We had, didn't we? Basically, you know, the heavies, the riot police called in the other week over people basically saying, hey, we want to know what's happening. Lots of concern from people over who actually is, who are the police actually looking for. And when they said we want some, help on people identifying who these people might be, police not giving any descriptions whatsoever. Now, they have said, have they not, that actually, look, they haven't made any arrests and they have yet to find any evidence of this crime. I said on the very first day that I became aware of the story, look, we always have to say, you know, alleged victim, alleged perpetrator, because we don't know whether a crime has even taken place at this point. But the thing is, there's not much trust in the police these days from anyone, is there?
No, and their communications from Surrey Police have been absolutely appalling. Gone are the days when a police officer would be put in front of the media, would speak as they saw it, would take questions, answer those questions, and thereby appear to be human and build some trust with the public and get some help from the public in return. Now, if you do get a police officer in front of the cameras. They are reading from a statement and they will not be deterred or distracted from it. And consequently, they won't take questions. And this is really cutting across the whole issue about public trust and confidence in the police. If your communications are rubbish, then people are simply either not going to listen or they're not going to trust you.
Yeah, and we see that again and again, don't we? Sadly, time is against us. Peter Bleksley, former Met Police Detective, talking sense as always. He doesn't need a script in front of him. Benedict Spencer still joining us. There is this issue that, look, the thing is, no one really trusts anything the police say because we know they've been basically, should we say, circumstantial. They've been Keir Starmery with the truth, have they not? Is that a phrase now? I think it should be.
Keir Starmering or civil servant, civil service ease. How on earth would you describe that? But it's not the direction we want to go down, is it? But no, it's ultimately that situation, isn't it, where people simply don't trust the police anymore. And of course, it comes on the tail end of so many other stories over the last couple of years, where the police have just created sort of vacuums of information and not given the right sort of information. It's just a series of errors over and over again.
They've created this problem for themselves, but it may well be the case again, and it does happen. It's not the majority of cases, but it does happen that someone has claimed they have been raped and they haven't actually been raped, and they cannot find evidence because there is no evidence to find. And I'm sorry, but that does actually happen. Anyway, we'll keep you posted on that story and everything going on with Keir Starmer.